Before I declare the meeting open, thank you all for coming. Before we commence the meeting, we are obligated to read out the conditions of the meeting, which will be done by the General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This meeting is recorded and live streamed for public viewing via the internet in accordance with the Council's Code of Meeting Practice, with the recording stored and made available to the public for later viewing. The recording is subject to copyright. Members of the public attending or speaking at this meeting will be recorded and publicly broadcast. By attending this meeting, you voluntarily consent to your attendance and participation being recorded. Any part of the meeting that is held in closed session will not be live streamed. Council requests that everyone present is respectful and uses appropriate language. Council does not accept liability for any defamatory, discriminatory or offensive comments that are made during the course of the meeting. Please ensure that all electronic devices, including mobile phones, are switched to silent. Under the Code of Meeting Practice, public recording of this meeting is prohibited without prior authorisation by Council. Council's live streaming of meetings via Facebook is designed to encourage constructive dialogue. We remind users to be digitally responsible and respect their fellow posters. We ask users to keep comments relevant and not to spam or post personal or commercially sensitive information. This includes content that may be defamatory, derogatory, offensive or discriminatory towards Council employees, councillors, other persons or organisations. Failure to follow Facebook house rules will result in comments being deleted, and if this behaviour persists, the user will be blocked.
Thank you, Madam General Manager. And just make sure all your mobile phones are turned off, please. Would you all stand now for commencement of the meeting? And I'll get acknowledgement of country by Councillor Ken Houston.
Mayor, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respect to elders both past and present. I also extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders that are present here today.
Thank you. And opening prayer by Reverend Doug McPherson from the Mittagong Presbyterian Church. If you wouldn't mind opening in prayer, thank you.
Dear God, we give you thanks and praise that you are here with us today. And we do pray that you would help Council today in Wingecarribee as it goes about its business. You are the Lord who is good, who is the source of all of our blessings. The earth is the Lord's, everything in it. We thank you, Lord, for the gift of life and health and strength. We ask that you would watch over and bless the entire Shire and help us all to pursue the glory of God, whether in the little things as well as in the big things, to manage your earth for the benefit of your people who live here in this earth. We do pray, Lord, that you would help us to treat each other with respect, with fairness and wisdom from you, the living God, in all the decisions that are made. We also pray for the Council. We thank you for them and ask, Lord, that you would strengthen them in their tasks and help them as they seek to exercise sensible decisions. And we pray, Lord, that whatever is good, that would be promoted. We ask, Lord, for your mercy and grace. We know that we need your continued grace and mercy, or we are prone to wander away. We have not loved you with all our love, our heart, soul, mind and strength. We do pray for help in management of all the Shire, from the forest to the green land, to the business, to the homes, to the streets, to the footpaths, that it might be a safe and enjoyable and prosperous place for all, and that we might maximise our resources wisely and generously. We do pray that you would watch over all the councillors, from the Mayor to all members and to all employers, and guide them in their administration of the Shire to consider the welfare of us all. We do pray, Lord, that you would continue to assist the guidance and direction of the Council today, and we do pray for those suffering grief in the Shire from losses due to fire and tempest and various things. We know, Lord, that there is much grief, much much affliction. We pray that you would grant mercy to those who call upon your name, and grant to them the peace of God which passes all understanding, to guard their hearts and minds in the knowledge and love of Christ. We do pray these things in the name of Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend. Now you have the apologies, and we have one apology, Councillor Peter Nelson. Can I have somebody?
That way, Mr Mayor.
Councillor McLaughlin and Councillor Marquardt put it. All in favour. Those against carried. We have adoption of previous minutes held on the 12th of February 2020. Somebody like to move the correctness? Councillor Whipper, seconded Councillor Marquardt. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Then I put it. All in favour? Up, sorry, Councillor.
Yeah, we might
on
need
the
these
correctness.
lights made more prominent, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to ask, I understand that there were a number of motions put up for that meeting.
Yes, the correctness of the minutes.
Well, when do you want me to ask this?
Right
Before
now,
or after?
it's on the correctness of the minutes.
Well, there's
not
no
business
mention
arising.
of these notices of motion in here, but in the business paper today there appears to be an item referring to motions and questions that were not allowed. Why would that report not... Can I ask my question?
No, I'm asking
I
the
haven't even asked
reasoning
what I'm
for...
asking.
Councillor
You're just always over
Scanlon.
the top of me, Mr Mayor. Anyway, I'm just trying to ask, why would that refusal not have been in those minutes?
Because they're in this council meeting agenda, councillor.
Yes, but
If
why?
you read the Code of Meeting Practice,
Yes, should have
says
been
to
in that
the-
agenda and
No,
therefore these minutes.
I have taken legal advice on what the next council meeting means.
Thank you. So put the recommendation. All in favour? Those against carried. Now, I would like a suspension. We've got item 9.1 as visitor item.
Excuse me, but declaration of
Then,
interest first.
declarations of interest,
Declaration of
and I
interest.
know we have one behind me. Mr Park Pepping first.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a pecuniary interest, non-significant, in item 18.4, notice of rescission motion for DA 20/0546, the erection of buildings for carrying out of a seniors housing development at 2 Orchard Street, Collervale, and I'll remove myself from the chamber.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Yeah, 13.2 report and 19.4 legal matters enclosed. I have a legal matter in with council at the moment. If there's any questions asked by council and council staff, I will leave the chamber. The third one, the second one is 11.5. It's the licence agreement for the FM use on Mount Gibraltar, and it's a non-pecuniary, and it's because I own a property adjacent to the towers.
Thank you. Councillor Marquardt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Non-pecuniary, non-significant on 12.3, change of use, studio to secondary dwelling. I worked with the applicant for a couple of years, involved with Public Health First, getting funding for Barrow Hospital, and we know each other quite well. I will stay in the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Whipper.
Also, Mr Mayor, item 12.3, page 157, the DA 1977-1. The applicant is a board member on my workplace committee, so therefore I'm declaring a non-pecuniary significant interest, and will remove myself from debate when the time comes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. Now, I've just been requested prior to the meeting. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, that's what I was. I think that's what I was going to ask you, Mr Mayor.
Not quite at the moment.
Oh, not quite yet.
Yeah, because things have moved around a little bit. I might ask Inspector Klepsarek to. Pardon?
I don't know. Go ahead.
Okay, I might ask Inspector Klepsarek to take a chair over there for 2 seconds. The reason being, we've got public forum, and there was a request from Councillor Turlin to allow a member of Balmoral Village Association, Elizabeth Aiken, to speak. That's not on the agenda item, and there are certain things that I have looked at to be brought forward. So I'm looking for, there'll be 3 parts to this motion. One will be that Elizabeth Aiken be given the chance to address council as in public forum. The reasoning being that Councillor Turland put in the request but did not get the response. And then the other one is if we bring forward the rescission motions in relation to Orchard Street and Ferguson Crescent, that they be brought forward after the visitors item. And Councillor McLaughlin has requested that the item number...
Item 15.1 petition be brought forward after that, Mr Mayor.
And that after those 2 areas that the petition in relation to Aiken Road be brought forward. So that is been the request by councillors, and if somebody would like to move that, then we'll do it. Councillor Turland?
Yeah, so we'll be in the suspending of standing orders at
Be
this point in time?
Be suspending standing orders initially to deal with those
3
items
issues.
as discussed. Okay, so it's moved Councillor Turland and was secondly Councillor Scandrett. So I put it, all in favour? Against? Carried. So and this throws us out a little bit, but I will now go to the public forum, and I'll ask Ms Elizabeth Aiken, would you mind coming forward?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My name is Elizabeth Atkin and I'm the President of the Balmoral Village Association, and I'm also a chaplain on leave in order to be able to provide my community with pastoral support and also some of the organisational skills. First of all, I'd like to thank very much the Council for the support they've shown, and in particular their staff members, particularly Kath Brennan and Charmaine Cooper, and also Mark Pepping. They've stepped up right back at the very beginning when we were still in the emergency stage, and have continued through with the recovery stage with helping man and keep our recovery centre going, which is based at the Balmoral Village Hall. In terms of our status, currently we have the Balmoral Village Green, which is the 4 acres to the north of the hall, being cleared. The villagers have a particular concern that this is cleared properly, and we did actually have a short chat with Mr Barry Arthur about some of the plants on that site. This has been, as I have informed the councillors previously and shown them photographs, a site that was one of the risk situations for the village, and that is a particular reason why we would like the promise to have the Balmoral Village Green actually presented to us, and the ideal opportunity, as Mr Mayor knows, is when the royal visit occurs, if it occurs. So we're hoping that this will be an impetus to council to really move on quickly with that clearing of the land and turning it into a true green space. To us, it's not just a green space, but it's also a very needed open space that we can evacuate to. We're very, very fortunate that the fire front did not hit directly onto our current fire station, because the 30 or 40 people inside would have been cooked like in an oven. And for this reason, I have also proposed that the council releases its trusteeship of the 2 Crown Land lots to the south of the hall in order to allow Balmoral Village Association, in cooperation with the RFS, to build a new station on that land and several large water storage facilities, and also opposite that on the railway land and the land that belongs to council, in order to provide a safety pad for railway carriages with water tankers to be able to directly deposit water into our fire trucks. This brings up another issue, namely that of town water to Balmoral Village. We're the only village along that area without town water. We depend entirely on tank water, and sadly, one of the reasons that Balmoral burned is because we didn't have enough water. So the proposal for town water to be run through into the village is a controversial one. We need to probably have a survey to make sure that it is something that the people in the village really want, because people like myself moved there particularly for the country ambience. We know that if we get town water, that the value of the land will go up, but that also means we'll get a lot of people coming in who are going to be commuters, not part of the village, and also there will be pushes to actually do a lot more development, thus losing us our village amenity. So we would like council to consider transferring that across, the two lots across, and also assist by clearing that land. That land was specifically responsible for bringing the fire into the village, as was the large block to the north of the town hall, the village hall. It took the fire onto the railway dash Endeavour Energy dash council land, and that actually carried through the village, and again it was a miracle that we were not burned.
Mr Mayor, before you go, Mr Code of Meeting Practice says 5 minutes. Was that 3 or 5? That was 5 minutes?
And it wasn't a public forum, Mr Mayor. I'd suggest a little bit of an extension.
We have the rules of the meeting which we are obliged to follow. I'm sorry, Elizabeth.
5 minutes.
No, I can't. I don't
2 minutes?
I can't give extension. I can't. You can come back again.
Well, it's just ridiculous.
Okay, I was just wanting to tell you all the good things that were actually happening in the village.
Come on.
Just show some
I'm being a...
Be a nice man.
I am.
All in favour?
Aye.
So just to let you know that there are good things coming out of this disaster. Balmoral Village now has a wildlife subgroup. It also has a number of people interested in doing a flora reconciliation, and Better Homes and Gardens are going to come and help do a program and assist us to get the renovations done with the grant that we had from council that I've had on order at Bunnings. So, thank you very much. There's lots of lovely things coming out of this disaster, so thank you for the extra minute.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, we'll follow the agenda item as...
Mr Mayor, just before we go, because we're on the Balmoral, this was in Sunday's paper.
Yeah.
I'd like to table that if we can, so that maybe we can put a few on the walls as people come into the chamber. It's just on Sunday's paper.
Yeah, well, you can, we'll formally do that after you can do that later on during the meeting when there's a item on the agenda that will probably allow that.
Okay.
So we have, in relation to public forum, change of use studio to secondary dwelling. Mr Scott Lee will address council on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, thank you, councillors. I speak on behalf of the owner and the applicant in this matter, Mr Keith Smith. I believe the councillors have visited the site, so will understand that this DA is about the use of an existing building as a secondary dwelling, the building having been previously approved by council many years ago. There's no suggestion that the built form has any adverse impacts. The issue is a technical one and revolves around council's willingness to accept a variation request on the floor area development standard for secondary dwellings. 60 square metres being the standard versus the existing floor area of 74 square metres. We do not agree with the recommendation in the council report. We'd be delighted if the councillors are of a mind to approve the development. However, it may be prudent to defer the matter to ensure that council has available the necessary information to exercise its decision-making powers in this case. There's two reasons I say that. Firstly, the applicant has made the necessary and appropriate clause 4.6 variation request, but that's not been made available to councillors as part of the business papers. I believe the owner did make it available to councillors. Secondly, the assessment report, upon which you need to make your decision, makes reference to the fact that the clause 4.6 request was submitted, but in my opinion fails to properly address the points made in our submission. We believe that we have satisfied our requirement and obligation to demonstrate that strict adherence to the floor area development standard is both unreasonable and unnecessary in the circumstances of this particular DA. However, we do not believe that council has fulfilled its reciprocal obligation to show why it is necessary and reasonable to enforce the development standard in this case. The report emphasises that council does not generally support variations to this development standard. That may be so, but that is not the question. Council's obligation under clause 4.6 is to assess the matter with specific regard to the circumstances of the case in front of it, and with respect to the arguments put forward in any variation request. Without access to our submission and no proper reference in the assessment report to our submission, I do not believe councillors should be refusing the DA tonight. A closer examination of the reasons in support of the variation that we have put forward would hopefully lead you to the conclusion that the DA is in fact worthy of support and not refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And just so the gallery knows, or the public knows, with public forum there is no questions from councillors in relation to public forum. The second public forum is in relation to notice of rescission motion, erection of buildings and carry out of works for seniors housing, Orchard Street, Colo Vale. Ms Elsie White will address council in support of the rescission motion.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors, council staff, thank you for your time and attention. My name is Elise White. I am the President of the Colo Vale Community Association. The character of our village is at risk in Colo Vale. Therefore, I've been nominated by interested residents of Colo Vale to urge each and every one of you to consider your responsibility to the village community and Colo Vale's opposition to the proposed seniors housing development on 2 Orchard Street, Colo Vale. We are opposed to the development in the village per se, but this structure is totally out of character. Now I've got some pictures, if I could please bring up one of the proposed a similar structure that's going on the property. I think Michelle's got some slides. No, the ones before, please. No. I'll keep talking. Up on the screen, hopefully, will come a proposed construction that will go on this small block of land. As you will see, when it does come up, the size and visual impact of this building will have on the small block of land in a very narrow street. Unfortunately, that's a very small picture, but anyway, hopefully will give you a bit of an idea. The previous picture that Michelle put up is of our village street. It's a very narrow little street, and this building will look like a huge factory in this lovely little country street. There was discussions by some of you previously when this was put to a vote that there are lots of 2-storey homes in Colo Vale. Opposite this quaint chalet-type home, which is two-storey but is to scale and in line with other homes nearby in Colavale. It was one of the previous pictures that came up. To compare this home to the proposed monstrosity is like comparing apples to watermelons. The bulk and scale of the proposed building is in complete contrast to any other building in the village, larger than the new RFS quarters on the left-hand side as you enter the village, and a reminder the RFS building is on a much larger block of land. This proposal is out of character with its size, height, and is unsympathetic to the current streetscape. It raises privacy issues and parking, will increase noise levels, interfering with quiet enjoyment and amenities of family life. A big issue is inadequate infrastructure for seniors, poor public transport, no medical facilities, no pharmacy, no safe pathways throughout the village. With recent rains, flooding has been an issue. There are a couple of very concerning issues as to the control of those residing in the home. I've been told today by Councillor Andrews that it's going to be strata managed, whatever that means. With over 55 supposedly promised to live in this property, what happens if somebody 18 comes and lives there? I just don't know how this is going to be policed. The second issue is what I thought was the apparent lack of lifts, but I've been guaranteed by Councillor Andrews that there are definitely lifts even though they don't show on the drawings. On behalf of the community I represent, including myself, we welcome the construction of a dwelling on this land in keeping with the character and preservation of village country living, as a pleasing looking home. In conclusion, a SWOT analysis of Colavale Village Precinct Plan was undertaken by Council which said this: the ambience of the village and its rural settings were seen as its greatest strengths along with its relatively close location to Sydney. The lack of general infrastructure, transport options and movement paths were seen as the greatest weakness, and a significant one at that. Greatest opportunities were in rectifying the lack of infrastructure and movement networks, with the greatest threat being that these issues are not addressed and that inappropriate development overtakes the village. This development is inappropriate. We are fighting to retain our village as it is, and most people in the Shire living in these villages are fighting for exactly the same thing. We accept it is a complying development, but it does not comply with the majority of Colavale residents, what they want in our village. Therefore, I ask you to support the rescission motion and oppose this development proposal in its current form. Thank you.
The third and last public forum is in relation to rescission motion, development application in relation to 30 residential lots in 21 Ferguson Crescent, Mittagong, and Mr Gary Mann will address council in support of the development.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, council staff. I'm just having a brief discussion in regard to the rescission motion which was placed on us in regard to the development of 21 Ferguson Crescent, Mittagong. It's not my intention. I believe as a company we've done more than was necessary or everything we possibly could to placate council's requests in regards to the development, be it traffic, be it trees and associated issues that were raised during the process of the DA in its council course. As we know, the council officers recommended the approval of the development. So I don't intend to labour on all of those issues. What I propose to do is I've just got some points of interest here that I'd like to raise with so that's in the forefront of councillors' minds, so that everybody has a clear understanding of just what we've tried to achieve and what the process has enabled along the way. And these are simply in bullet point form, so I do apologise for the brevity, but I think this is more than what we deem necessary to get us to where we want to go on this development. Firstly, the development for a 30-lot subdivision has been formally endorsed by Council and Transport for New South Wales, who has the care and control of the old Hume Highway. Secondly, the independent traffic report provided to Council was based on a 44-lot subdivision and not on a 30-lot subdivision as per the DA before Council today. The proposal is in accordance with the current zoning of the site, and we seek to subdivide the land as council intended in their development of the LEP. The lot sizes comprise 700 and 1,000 metre squared lots. Our preferred option from day one was to have had 6 of the lots access the development by way of Highlander Street. However, with council's insistence that Highlander Street remain stet, plans were amended accordingly, showing all access points off Ferguson Crescent. Curbing and guttering and footpath will be installed along Ferguson Crescent, so it'll be along the whole depth and breadth of Ferguson Crescent from a safety aspect. The site is within walking, cycling distance to Mittagong Town Centre and public transport. There is no heritage status associated with this site. It is our view that there will be many beneficiaries from this development as the DA proposes, and we seek council's endorsement today to proceed with the development application in its current form. Thank you very much, folks.
Okay, so we move to the first part of the business paper, which is item 9.1, emergency management arrangements for local emergency plans. And Chief Inspector John Klepsarek.
Are we still in the suspension of standing orders, Mr Mayor?
No, we're on.
And then go on to the rescission motion.
We're going on to the rescission motion after.
So are we still in suspensions of standing orders?
Oh, well, we are.
That's what I'm asking. Are we still in suspension of standing orders?
Well, we should have, no, we might be. Did I put that?
No, you haven't yet. That's why I'm asking.
Then I will put the...
No, while you're there, I'm asking if we are still in suspension standing orders. I have a question, and it's a notice of motion I put forward with Mr Count Housestead, ex-me, on the 17th of the 2nd, to go into closed council, which related to... standing orders. I can bring this up now because...
No, that was Councillor Turlin, please. We are in relation to emergency management issues.
You are in suspension of standing orders right now. This can be brought up.
That, you can't do that.
I will.
Mr Martin Spurry, would you like to come forward as well, please? You have been mentioned here as, will address council as well. Can we have another chair, please?
Speak after John.
Yes, well, I'd like to. And who is going to introduce this item? Who's introducing this item?
Mr Paul.
Thank you.
It says here Mr Paul.
Councillors, this report is tabled today in response to a question from Councillor Markwart in relation to what arrangements are in place for emergency management for Wingecarribee Shire. The report sets out the framework and the legislation under which emergency management is dealt with within the Shire and also across the state. If you look at page 3 of your report, it shows the legislative framework, which is the SERM Act, and also how the state, the regional and local emergency management frameworks work in totality. The report also talks about the bushfire preparedness and the bushfire management committee, and Chief Inspector John Klepsarek, as the liaison for this area, will discuss in more detail arrangements around the local emergency management plan, and Superintendent Martin Surrey will talk about bushfire preparedness.
Thank you. And before questions to the General Manager in relation to it, I think I'd like to acknowledge the work that both of these gentlemen have done over the past 2 months now, really, and the effort that they put in. I was in constant contact with not so much Martin as more Chief Inspector John Klepsarek, virtually on a daily basis, and the organisation skills of both of these gentlemen is to be recognised in the way that the situation was managed. And we had 2 fires, one that was managed from the south initially, and then, of course, one from the north. But so to you, Chief Inspector, thank you for your contribution, and to you as well, Martin. Very much appreciated by the community.
I'd like you to add that as a vote of thanks as point 2.
Yeah, we'll get when we get to the recommendation. I'll ask before any councillors ask questions. I'll ask Chief Inspector to make comment or an overview as how you see it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, the councillors, also our General Manager. I'd just like to take this opportunity to speak to you, not as the officer in charge of the Southern Highlands Police, but as has been pointed out, the Wingecarribee Local Emergency Operations Controller, or LEOCON. The last 2 months have been, and the word unprecedented has been probably used 1,000 times over by every man his dog, but what we experienced was something unlike the Shire's never seen before. I'd like to acknowledge and thank Council for their support during this time. What has to be made aware to the community, and unfortunately, it doesn't matter what day an emergency occurs, it's always at the worst time. It's either on a weekend, at night, or during a holiday period. And in this case, Council were more or less shut down for the Christmas New Year time, and virtually had no staff virtually available. And in that circumstances, the amount of resources, personnel that you managed to muster up to support the Emergency Management Committee and the emergency services should be acknowledged. It's not an easy time to ask people to give up their leave or to work 20-hour shifts, as in some occasions. I particularly want to acknowledge Amanda Lawrence, who was on sick leave, having a knee replacement, yet every day she was at the Emergency Operations Centre. Also, Dominic Lucas was there for way more hours than somebody should be expected to. But this was unprecedented time, and it is an emergency for our Shire. Whilst Council is not a combat agency or not responsible for any of the emergencies that could occur, they do have a legislative requirement to support the agencies that do. And if I take you back about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, Council actually were audited on their emergency management arrangements, and I could say probably fell short of what was required from a local council to support their community in an emergency. But I'm here today to say that come 6, 7 years later, that on many fronts you're leading the state on local arrangements. The emergency management plans that are developed through the Local Emergency Management Committee with the help of council staff have been plagiarised around the state many, many times. The work that goes into them is huge and very time consuming. So I acknowledge the administrative support to get those plans in place. I'd like to inform Council and also the community the work that goes into preparing for an emergency. Our role is not to just respond to fire and flood, is probably what everybody is aware of. But behind the scenes, we have plans in place for earthquakes, tsunamis, major train derailments. We need to be ahead of the game. No need on something massive happening that impacts our community and then start thinking, what are we going to do? So I just want to reassure again the councils and the community, we're doing a whole lot of work behind the scenes. Already we've tested biohazard at the local sale yards that and we've seen years ago with the equine flu, cost the state billions of dollars and ground a lot of industry. You have a major sales yard here and we are prepared if something happens there. We're about to test our plane crash emergency plan. Again, planes don't, and this is where probably people say in the time of peace, why are you preparing for a plane crash? You have a major regional airport down in the Illawarra. You have military planes that fly over the Shire. Again, if there's an emergency and a plane has to come down at the nearest spot, we've identified Mittagong airstrip as a place, and it has been used by Black Hawk aircraft, whether you know it or not, to put down for certain reasons. Again, at 2 in the morning, if a Black Hawk crashes at Mittagong Airport, I don't need to start thinking, what should we do now? We have to have it in place now. And same with a tsunami. People may say, tsunami? I can tell you now, experts have said the Illawarra down to the south coast are a chance of some sort of a tsunami hitting. If that hits down the coast, yeah, it'll have devastating consequences down there. Where do you think all the people from the Illawarra will go to? I can tell you the Highlands will be the #1 stop, because it is a great place to come, but it is also the closest for them to come. We will have tens of thousands of people up here needing a whole lot of support, and not a good time to start thinking, where should we put them? We've got to know that now. So all these plans, we are trying to think fire and floods. It's a bit like cornflakes and Cocoa Pops. We can do that any day of the week. The magnitude we'll have to adjust to. For fires and floods, we've got experts. Our RFS and SES, and I've worked around the state, are some of the best in the state. They will do a good job at all of those. But if we had the XPT come through here and derail 7 or 8 carriages, are we ready for that? Who's going to be responsible for that? I can tell you what council are going to be saying, what's happening? When is the train going to, when can I get close to it? Now's not the time to start planning for it. We've got to put something on the table and say we're ready to go. So as unique and obscure of a plan that is out there, we're trying to think of it first here and how to respond. Will we get it right? Probably not the first time, because we haven't experienced something of a huge magnitude. But I'll tell you what, we'll give it a red hot go. So that is the reason for the Emergency Management Committee to meet at least quarterly and to start thinking, okay, what are the risks for this area? And, you know, this should be a reassurance again to council and the community that how do we keep them safe? Because what we've experienced over the last 5 to 10 years is, you know, yes, we have rain, yes, we have hot days, but the extremity is unlike it's ever been before. And, you know, the best example of it was a couple of weeks ago, where we were in a state of emergency, Section 44 declared fires, and a week later, our SES were flat out. Barrel and Mittagong were cut off when we were under floods. The extreme of those weather events are becoming what the experts are saying is the norm. So all those plans have to be in place, because it's not that we're just having a rain now or a fire, we're having something extreme. So, but council have supported us well at a time, and you know, we have to be aware that we're limited by budget and resources, and pound for pound you've done quite well. So I just want to again thank you all, but also to reassure you all that we're doing a good job here.
Thank you very much. Just stay there. I'd just like to, it was 6th of January at about 10:30 at night, and I get a phone call from Chief Inspector John Klepsarek. Are you okay out there at Fitzroy Falls? I hear you might have to evacuate. So thank you for making the effort to see, and I evacuated, but everything was okay. Questions to Chief Inspector, then I'll ask Inspector Martin Spurry to say a few words. So is there any questions at this stage to...
Yeah. Look, thank you very much. You've done an amazing job, both of you and all the whole team that you've pulled together in such a short period. With such an event that we had, I noticed you brought up earthquakes, because it's not in this report, and I brought it up in our briefing session. Earthquakes will happen in our Shire. We are on a fault line, and you know that, you've just mentioned, which is fantastic. So that's one thing, you've answered the question I was going to ask. But the second question, the most important question is, the Mittagong airfield, you believe that's an asset to the Shire to have that airfield, being 7 helicopters were there at the fire stages, going north and south, back and forwards the whole time. So do you believe the Mittagong airfield is an asset to the Shire for emergency?
Any resources or capability is an asset, but you know, I'm aware of the amount of work and upkeep that those people out there are doing to maintain an airport that probably isn't the size that can be any commercial flight can be utilised. But previously, and I can't speak probably enough for the RFS, but they have used on occasions, their water refilling helicopters have landed there. So having a facility like that is good for the area, but I'm also aware of the amount of work for such an area, and to be of any substantial use, maybe an upgrade or two is necessary there as well.
Yeah, there's a possibility of extending it 300 metres, and that's going through its process now, and that will make a huge difference for the rural fire service mainly. But that was the reason for the question.
Oh no, it does. But with like everything else, you block this problem up. You'll then have an operating airport that.
No, only for it's only.
As long as it doesn't bring problems to you. But it is an asset, and we found over the fire season it was utilised.
Thank you.
Okay, question to Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, but my question is probably a fire-related one.
Well, if there's no more questions to Chief Inspector, then Councillor Halstead.
I'll put mine in the form of a question. So, Mr Mayor, you will agree with me, wouldn't you, that due to the long-standing reputation and, dare I say, track record of in police matters of John Klepchak, and more recently in terms of his involvement with emergency management procedures, that should be acknowledged. And from the point of view of this community, I certainly value John in police matters as well as this one. But I think this one here, the effort was extraordinary. And I wasn't involved day to day like obviously you were, but I can just imagine with John there, you wouldn't have had many worries. So I put it in that form. So I think some stage we need to do something about
I think if you want to, and Councillor Scandrett has also flagged it, maybe staff, while Martin's giving his overview, can put some words together to put in a recommendation to reflect both of your comments. Anything else to Chief Inspector? Thank you. Thanks. Okay, so I'll just ask Inspector Surrey to give his overview of the emergency management plan and any comments in relation to the previous couple of months. I think now would be an appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors. The last couple of months locally have been extraordinary for our 1,900 odd members, our 41 brigades of the Southern Highlands team. Our firefighting didn't start a couple of months ago. We've had people on the move since August of last year. Up Region North, we manoeuvred approximately 120 people up to Glen Innes, Tenterfield, across to the coast. On 7-day rotations. Our support people did 62 trips to the airport and back. If you ever need an Uber, they're the people to call. They certainly know their way. Look, it has been busy, but can I say that the support of the council and the community has been humbling and overwhelming, and I'll say that on behalf of all of our brigades. It hasn't just come from the fires. We go to many meetings, whether it be station openings or AGMs, and at least one of the councillors will be there. They get dragged along to those. So I do thank you for your ongoing support of our people and our brigades. To the council, nothing's ever an issue for the council when it comes to the RFS. We work collaboratively on a lot of projects and looking forward to where we need to be in the next 10 to 20 years, putting our proposals forward. And I can say that we've always had the ear and the gracious time of the General Manager and the Deputy General Managers will hear us out on our proposals. The fires which we've seen over the past 70 odd days, or they took 70 days to put out, weren't put out by sheer luck. They were brought under control by the collaboration of all of those agencies which Inspector Klepchak mentioned through the LEMC. The members of the Local Emergency Management Committee, uniquely within the Southern Highlands team, and I will talk across the Wallandilly Wingecarribee, we have cross-pollination of members of the Local Emergency Management Committee into our Bushfire Management Committee. I think it's really important that the responders understand the preparatory nature of the BFMC, our mitigation to risk and our hazard reduction process, which we go through on a yearly basis. With the support of all agencies, we've from January 2019 to now, we were able to just do shy of 9,000 hectares of hazard reduction last year. And you've heard my boss, the Commissioner, talk about the dangers of hazard reduction over the drought period over the last 12 months. And despite those significant dangers, our people, our volunteers, our Fire Rescue New South Wales colleagues and indeed State Forests and National Parks found a way to work safely in carrying out those hazard reductions for the protection of the community. 8,000 hectares is not much in the scheme of things when we've just put out 330,000 hectares of fire. But the 330,000 hectares of fire just goes to show how enormous our risk is to these communities and the community of Wingecarribee and Wallandilly. There is a lot of bush left, despite the fact of those two big fires, and we will continue with forward momentum in putting strategic burns in where and when possible as the weather allows us, where safety is paramount, and we'll continue to do so into the future with the collective assistance of council, parks, fire and rescue, and the police in many instances, because we close a lot of roads every now and then. I will just finish, if I can, by saying that everybody who was on that fire ground on a daily basis, it was 300 to 500 firefighters every day for over 70 days on that fire. All the fires had one thing in common, and that was the intent. And the intent was for the protection of life, and on many days it was only the protection of life. That's all we could do. The protection of property, keeping the fire as small as we can, and ensuring that the information which we provided to the community was accurate, prompt, timely and clear as we could make it. And I think that on behalf of the incident management team, I think that they nailed it. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Questions from councillors in relation to the report or anything that Inspector Surrey has said? Councillor Scandron.
Mr Mayor, thank you. Inspector Surrey, Martin, thank you very much. Truly fantastic what all your teams have done, and I do want to make note, Mr Mayor, maybe a point through that our own staff, who were particularly pulled back from annual leave, be also thanked, and you could name them as you wish. But a couple of questions for you, if I may. One is, we saw a number of incidences where villages were threatened. People were worried about how they were going to escape, where they left it too long. That's another story. But canopies over the roads, significant vegetation on the roadsides and the like. I'm just wondering if that's going to be reviewed in depth as the emergency committee obviously goes through that clean-up process. That's my first question.
Thank you. We'll go one question at a time. Thank you, Councillor Scandron. Let other councillors come around. They might ask the same question. Inspector Surrey.
Yes, so through our bushfire risk management plan, we have a number of scales of hazard and risk analysis right the way across the district, ranging from extreme down to the very low. We'll work from the extreme down. We'll get funding to mitigate the extreme risks. Roadside vegetation is an ongoing project and forms part of that risk management process. We have to do some modifications to our risk management plan because some of our risks have been taken out of our 5-year cycle because of the major fires and the impact that the wildfire had. So we will definitely be looking at spreading what we can save now into further risk analysis and mitigation. I would suggest, however, that there wouldn't be wholesale cutting down of trees along roadsides. Roadside vegetation management is about eliminating the risk of fire starting from a vehicle or fire starting from a lit cigarette out the window, and it shouldn't detract from the country nature of the place.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you. thank you very much for your work. As we all know, we are under your control when, when the emergency happened. So I think we're all very grateful that we've got people in your position. Just with regard to, as John Klepsarek said, the new norm, as we know, with climate change, we're seeing a difficulty probably in your perspective to reduce loads, given that, having the opportunity to do that, where, we have a huge build-up and you don't get the opportunity due to weather conditions. Is that going to be something that, how will you try and address to try and reduce that around and protect, as you said, lives, but properties going forward?
Yeah, so it's, without discussing climate change and its effects, yes, we do have field build-ups. We did go through the drought, but it's something we've been dealing with for many years now, is our ability to mitigate all the risks that we have. It sometimes comes down to resources, it comes down to the time of year, it comes down to the weather patterns, and it also comes down, well, very much rainfall. We also have a new world order where the smoke modelling occurs. We model smoke to see where it may affect, whether it's going to sit in the basin, the Sydney Basin, a lot of the smoke that we have there. So there's a number of variables which we go through before we do mitigation. But we will continue to push as hard as we can, like we have through the Wollondilly Wingecarribee BFMC leads the state in the amount of hectares we've been able to do tactically and strategically in the protection of houses. We'll continue to do that. And I always put the emphasis on we will continue to do that as long as it's safe for my people to go out there and do it. I'm a big firm believer in the risk is not worth to the people is not worth the potential. But we also, with the council, with other agencies, we have mechanical mitigation as well. APZs which we maintain. So it's not all about burning. But I'm sure that the inquiries which are taking place now will look strictly at hazard reductions and the methods and the way forward, given climate change and given the changing seasons. And as Inspector Klepsarek said, the new norm, how we work around that. I see one big change being that for the last 3 years now, I've had to bring the start of the bushfire danger period forward to September. I can see that being the new norm, whereas the October to the end of March will be yesterday. Tomorrow will be fluctuating between sort of late August, September through. So we may see a change in the bushfire danger period.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Yeah, bit of a conflict. I live on Mount Gibraltar right at the top, and we watched the fires clearly all the way to the north. We could see it. And looking at Mount Alexander and the Gib and all the Mittagong township is basically in between two fire zones.
Yep.
From south to north. So I think those are two areas that we are concerned about as Mittagong people. It could have been lost with one spark coming across the top, and at one stage there was a spark.
Yep.
And I could hear on the radio it was a dozer clearing one of the tracks and the dust was coming up.
Yep.
We thought a fire had started in Mount Alexander. So the question to you is that both Mount Alexander and Mount Gibraltar, I'm hoping that next year, or in the next couple of years, that we actually control the back burner on those areas to save life, save property.
Sure. Yeah. Is that a question? Sorry.
The
question is, are we going to? Look, those two areas are certainly part of our risk management plan, and there has been burning done in the last two seasons on both of those areas in small strategic compartments. Look, we will do mosaic burning in those two areas, because if we were to take the whole lot out, I would guarantee you that we would get rain after it, and we would have landslides, we would have the trails obliterated through the rain. We need to be very careful about we don't undermine the hills. So we'll undertake strategic burning where it's necessary, in line with environmental criteria. Certainly we have with Fire and Rescue New South Wales, who together with Council manage the GIP. They also manage Mount Alexander. We obviously assist them, and through the BFMC we'll categorise those as they come up as risk. However, it is extremely important to understand that they are two components of risk within the district. They are among 20 or 30 extreme risks that we have, and you know, we did a hazard reduction called Centre Ridge Hazard Reduction, which burnt behind Hilltop all the way through to Buxton, and yeah, we were very, very extremely lucky that we did, and we got that, and that had been planned strategically for that very reason, and we will continue to work that way.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Markward hasn't asked a question yet.
I was going to actually suggest I move a motion given my question, but
I'll just
okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Only
Mayor.
one.
Yes, and the motion I'd like to move. But the question I was going to ask, Superintendent, was you are aware that Elizabeth Atkin talked about a new station being desired for Balmoral, and I know you don't have funding for that. I know you don't, and I know that we don't.
Okay, the question, please.
And I know that we don't have funding. So if there's an offer coming in from outside, third party, there's a lot of money floating out in the public area or state or federal, will the RFS locally be interested in building that new station, and also any other stations you need to upgrade? And are there some that need resourcing, please?
Yeah, so we have discussed, and I have indeed discussed the movement of Balmoral Station, and as I have suggested, that it's not within our scope and in our plans at the moment to move Balmoral Brigade. However, in principle, I am open to the suggestion of moving it for other purposes. However, I can't pay for it and won't pay for it because it's not part of our priority. I've got two priorities at the moment, one of them being Avoca Fire Station, which I need to move to Fitzroy Falls. The station at Avoca is becoming such that it doesn't meet our standard and the standards that we would expect our firefighters to work out of. The fire station, which is currently out on the Wombian Caves Road, which is at Wollondilly, the Wollondilly Fire Station, we need to move to Bulleo, and those who have travelled from the Wollondilly Fire Station through the tunnel out to Bulleo would see how dicey the road can be at any kind of speed. All of our volunteers of the Wollondilly Fire Station live at Bulleo, so it makes perfect sense to have them straight into their fire station out at Bulleo for not only the safety reasons, but because of the remoteness out there. Any expedient response to any kind of structural fire or any kind of incident out there is paramount. But those two fire stations are our priority at this stage, but I would welcome any discussion about any other funding that comes in to assist. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
We have a Councillor Markward.
I'd like to move the recommendation because it's my question to Council.
Okay, yep. So move Councillor Markward, secondly Councillor Scandrett. Yes, we're just doing the management item. We're doing the emergency management item, and then after the visitors' items, we will be then going into the rescission motion. But we have to move this recommendation, which was moved by Councillor Markward, seconded by Councillor Scandrett.
I think you can, because you're still in visitor item. There's still another item on the agenda.
Sorry, no. We are moving this as a business item. I put the recommendation. All in favour, please say aye. Right, now, we have visitor item 9.2, development application, multiple dwelling housing containing 7 units, 25 Oxley Drive, Barrel, and Mrs. Christine Ducker will address Council against the development.
Thank you. I'm here today with a number of... Sorry. I'm here today with a number of neighbours from Oxley Drive, all of whom are quite upset about this development because of the impact on our living conditions and the amenity of our street. We're objecting to the development on a number of grounds, and so the affected residents are my husband and I at number 29B Oxley Drive, also numbers 29, 29A and 29C Oxley Drive, and the owners of the townhouses in the Berwick estate at number 23 Oxley Drive, and they are number townhouses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. So the impact is significant. The real problem with this site is it's a very steep and narrow site, and it causes problems that a level site would likely not cause for its neighbouring properties. There'll be no detrimental impact from the street, but there certainly is for all the neighbours along the east and west boundaries of the site. I note that a further revised DA was lodged on the 4th of February, and contrary to statements that were made in that DA, our architect whom we engaged did take into account possible further remediation of the impact by the developers, but it has negligible effect. There are some slides that Michelle might put up, some modelling by our architect, which I'll get to in a minute. So we engaged an architect to look at the impact. We can't really see all that much, the impact on the site. Without seeing the steepness of the slope, for some reason we all like living on a hill, it's a bit difficult to see just what it does to the neighbouring properties. But the main impacts are lack of privacy and overshadowing, and they are severe. So the first slide, which shows the length of the site in our house, actually shows, it's been modelled in 3D by our architect, and council has those documents, shows the winter shade, which is our concern, in the mid-afternoon, and the severe impact on all of the numbers on 29, 29A and 29B in Oxley Drive. Currently, we have a house and garden with empty land alongside, so we are flooded with sunlight in winter all day long. We know we can't hang on to that forever, but surely there's a limit to how badly affected we ought to expect to be. The effects of this are actually quite shocking when we saw this modelling. Slide 2 shows the improvement if the roof of townhouse number 5 were removed altogether, and it gives us an extra half hour of sunlight in the middle of winter, but that is negligible compared with what we have now. So townhouses 4 and 5 in this development are the problem because they're on a part of the site where it's called 2 stories from natural ground level, but from where we are it's actually 4.5 stories high. So it's way out of scale. The architect concluded that the excessive height and bulk of the roof form of Unit 5 particularly causes extensive loss of midwinter solar access to both 29B's outdoor open space after 1 p.m. and the living room windows after 2 p.m. The height and roof form of Unit 4 blocks the sun completely to the northern outdoor space from 2:30 p.m. onwards. While the DCP controls strictly adhered to in this proposal, they do not satisfy the amenity test for neighbouring properties as shown in the shadow diagrams. So our architect went one better than the developer's revised proposals. He removed the roof entirely, which the revised proposals certainly do not do, but it still doesn't work. The impact on the Berwick units on the western side of the proposed development will also be significant. They have small back gardens which adjoin their eastern boundary, which is the western boundary of the proposed development. The 10 new townhouses are going to be built very close to that boundary, and the townhouses will look straight into the Berwick Gardens. So the people living in those townhouses, and there are 7 of them, will have no privacy in their back gardens. And the other major detrimental impact is that their winter morning sun will be totally blocked. That also jeopardises any vegetation growing in those gardens. It's pretty much the only winter sun that those little gardens receive. The last slide, which is that the last one? Sorry, that's the view from townhouse 4 and 5 down into our house on 29B. So you can see that from townhouse 5 particularly, they have a totally uninterrupted view of our entire house and gardens. On the northern side of our house in the western corner, we have our kitchen, dining, living, which are our main living rooms. On the western side, which is this side, on this side, we also have living rooms and bedrooms. And the new townhouses will look directly into our bedrooms and into our living rooms. The only way we'll have any privacy is to pull the blinds down. Currently, I like to do that to block out some sun, but I don't really want to have to make my house dark to block out neighbours. We've built our house so that it maximises the sun on our block. We pushed it to the southern side so that we have maximum northern exposure. We have a great deal of open space on our northern side. We have a very large solar system which takes advantage of the northern sun. We have a house being built above us, but we allowed for that. It doesn't detrimentally impact our solar panel access in winter to any significant degree. However, the new townhouses will. They'll overshadow our garden, they'll block our sun, they'll destroy our privacy. They will take the sun from the Berwick Gardens on the other side of the block. They will take all the privacy also from the residents in the Berwick estates. We always figured that this site would be redeveloped at some point. That's life in Bowral. We all can cope with that if it's done in accordance with the amenity of the area. Call me naive, but I think this development's something you might expect to find in the middle of Sydney, Redfern perhaps, not in Bowral. So I think there are a number of factual errors in the reports to the council, and I think the council risks making a decision based on factual errors that have been put in the revised development report as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, before you go, questions. Questions from council.
Okay.
Councillor Scandrett.
Right. Mrs. Ducker, clearly you have a view about that there was going to be something eventually there.
It'd be naive to think there weren't. Yeah.
And what would that something be in your view? Is it substantially different to this?
Lower height levels, perhaps less townhouses, but certainly lower height. Where the slope comes down like that, there are townhouses that have a garage basement, 2 stories on top, we're another effective story below that. So from our house, looking up, it looks like 4.5 stories. That's what the architect measured. On the Berwick side, where they currently have open space, and the 4 apartments that are currently on that site are single story and have flat roofs. So there's no impediment on the Berwick Gardens at the moment. So anything that's 2-story and built very close to the boundary, and this is a very narrow site, will affect the privacy and the light going into Berwick. That's of concern when most of your lights, morning light coming from the eastern side, and that's going to be almost totally blocked. And in winter, which is worse.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Ward.
Thank you. Just a very simple question. Could you give me the most significant factual error in the council report? Thank you.
Yes, there's reference to the northeastern corner of our house and the fact that it's not a relevant consideration. The northeastern corner of our house is our master bedroom. It's never been raised by us at all, and yet the developer's subsequent report focuses on that as the reason why whatever they want to do is not going to impact us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turler.
Yeah, looking at the plans that we've got in front of us at the moment, 1/3 of the height of this is the roof. So if the roof was taken off and the flat roof was...
We had, sorry, one of the slides had the roof removed.
Which is what you're
Yeah.
proposing.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at, is this particular proposal at the moment. So if councillors were of the decision to say all the roofs had to be a flat sort of roof structure, maybe with the sawtooth facing north, south, east or west, more likely south, because that's the better way to have a sawtooth, to let light in, would you be amenable to that?
It doesn't really address the fundamental problem.
Changes the sun dramatically.
No, not dramatically.
Well,
Gives us half an hour extra.
Okay, we're in getting into a little bit of difference of opinion. Any other questions? No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll have Ms Alison Stevens will address council in support of the development.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr Mayor and councillors. My name is Alison Stevens from Coble Stevens Architects, and we are the architects for this project. I'm speaking today just to reiterate that we've prepared an application that has addressed the DCP in great detail, and council's planning officers do recommend approval. Specifically, we would like it noted that the proposal meets the minimum 50% landscaping requirement.
which is the most onerous of the calculations set in the DCP. It meets the requirements for visitor parking, resident parking, setbacks and height. It is significantly under the floor space ratio allowance by 408 square metres and meets the overshadowing and privacy controls. These outcomes have been through careful design, acknowledgement of neighbour concerns and modification of the design where needed to ensure that this project complies with the DCP and has good outcomes for the neighbours. We'd like noted that we've ensured that the standards of accessibility have been met and clearly documented on the plans, with the 3 units near the street meeting the requirements of the Australian standards for both adaptability and accessibility as stipulated by the DCP. The internal referrals to council's offices and the external referrals to Water New South Wales and the Rural Fire Service have raised no objections and their proposed DA conditions are achievable. The concerns of the neighbours in regard to privacy and overshadowing were passed on to us by council, and we modified roof forms and screening to address any issues. The attachments to the agenda show the number of additional documents we provided, with detailed shadow modelling at half-hour increments to ensure council could be certain of their assessment that the neighbours will receive the required winter sun. The width of the block should not be an impediment to approval. There are many examples of other approved medium density projects on blocks less than 25 metres wide. I note in particular 25 Ascot Road in Barrel, which is identical in width and was approved in 2018 with only 42% landscaping. In conclusion, the project meets the design requirements of the DCP, even though the site is challenging due to the aspect and topography. It is zoned R3 medium density, as are all the neighbouring properties. It is a permissible use as council zone the land for infill medium density development, and it is therefore not unreasonable for a medium density development to be proposed for the site. It is also unrealistic to expect that the land should remain as is without further development, even with the minor shortfall on allotment width. In conclusion, we believe the intricacies of the design embrace the topography, providing a sympathetic building style compatible to the Southern Highlands trend of contemporary country housing. We ask Council to endorse the recommendation of their Planning Department and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions to Ms Stevens? Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yep, thank you, Ms Stevens. Just with regard to the design we're seeing and talking about how you have made some modifications, but given, I take it you're an architect?
Yes.
We see a lot of modern buildings now that have that boxy look, that are just a square without a pitch roof.
Yes.
Is there any opportunity, given the concerns from the community around you, that you might find that this could go through if you were to look at the evaluation of reducing that by taking roofs out and have that box look?
Look, there is always potential. We have modified the design several times.
Sure.
There's potentially conflict in terms of the fact that a box stepping down the hill may not work as well as things with pitch roofs that can kind of go more with the slope.
Is that for the aesthetics, or is that for just the physical?
A combination of both. A combination of both, yes. I mean, we believe that pitch roofs with hips and gables were more appropriate to Southern Highlands design style.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turlett.
Yeah, as I mentioned to the previous speaker, that if you would remove 1/3 of the height from those, we basically turn all those roofs into a flatter roof section, maybe with a sawtooth with windows coming back, it would generate a lot more sun into the neighbour's property. Because only 25 metres wide, when you stand in that garage, you won't even see the roof there. It's too high. So the roof structure is really not seen from anywhere when you drive down the... it wouldn't even be seen from the neighbours, probably.
Question?
The width. Well, the question is, again, reiterating that you, Councillor McLaughlin, has said that if a flatter roof section was undertaken through all these properties, that would help the sun into each of the other neighbours' properties to the east. Flat roof.
Yeah, so you're answering rather than us.
Well, I'm just asking the question. I just think that might be a way to solve it.
Okay, well then, Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you,
Question
Mr. Mayor.
to Ms Stevens, please.
Yes, thank you.
No, I'm just saying that
I
rather than
noticed you
answering
indulged
questions...
Councillor Turland for a while before you said that. Anyway, look, we're caught between a rock and a hard place, Council, at time, and I think architects too, because you're briefed to extract the maximum yield. Is there any flexibility in your client's briefing here to give, and I notice you've reduced it from 8 to 7,
Yes.
if I'm correct, but is there any more humanity in the client's briefing to address this so you end up with a happy community? This road has always been a challenge with us with medium density.
Yes.
So my question is there some flexibility?
I probably can't answer for my client on that one because I haven't actually asked him that question myself. So I would have to just take that question on notice and pass it forward. I couldn't really respond on his behalf.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you very much, Ms.
Thank you.
Stevens.
Thank you.
Can we have a introduction, Mr. Wilton, please?
Through the Chair, the purpose of this report is to consider DA 19-1042, which seeks development consent for the purpose of a multi-dwelling housing development at 25 Oxley Drive, Bowral. The site is zoned R3 medium density residential under the Wingecarribee Local Environment Plan, and the site does occupy an area of 2,068 square metres. The site is significantly constrained with flood affectation to the southern portion of the site, pockets of endangered ecological community and a steep topography falling 21 metres from north to south on the site. The site also contains an existing RFB building with 4 units fronting Oxley Drive. The current proposal seeks consent for the construction of 3 4-bedroom units and 4 3-bedroom units within 3 2-storey buildings stepping down the site. External built form materials are fibre cement cladding, a weatherboard and a 25-degree pitch colour-bond roof. Landscaping treatments are also proposed, applied to the site at a rate of 50%. And the application also seeks removal of 12 of the 45 trees with a replacement planting of 3 to 1. There's also, proposal also seeks a GFA, or gross floor area of 896 square metres, and that represents an area of 0.34 to 1. There's also a provision of 50 square metres of private open space for each dwelling, with one minor departure of Unit 3 at 47 square metres. The development is fully compliant with Council's LEP and DCP controls, with the exception of the lot width, requiring 25 metres. However, 20.7 metres has been achieved. Council staff identified that departure has merit on the basis of an established R3 area and also existing RFBs being present on the land. The overriding lot width is not expected to cause any undesirable or unmanageable impact on the surrounding area. Another identified departure with the DCP controls, as I mentioned previously, is a private open space on Unit 3, where the controls identify a 50 square metre requirement and the maximum 47 square metres has been achieved on this occasion. Given the low GFA for the site and the existing site constraints, the justification for this departure has merit. Proposal is also broadly consistent with Council's adopted policy position on promoting more infill development within the local government area. Proposal was advertised for a period of 28 days, with 10 submissions being received during the exhibition period. Key issues included that we received during that notification period was overshadowing, privacy, density and character, setbacks, tree removal and landscaping. There was also comments made in relation to market demands and heat effects. Response to those submissions have been detailed in the Council report this evening on pages 20 to 23. And on the basis of the assessment, Council staff are satisfied that the proposal has merit and that it's recommended approval on this occasion.
Thank you. Questions to Mr. Wilton. Councillor Turlin.
I understand this is in the conservation zone, so is it mandatory we have a pitched roof in the conservation zone?
Mr. Wilton.
Through the Chair, this isn't within the actual conservation area. The proposal does have pitch roofs and we've assessed it on that basis.
Thank you. Councillor Halstead.
Mr. Wilton, would you agree or not that probably the major issue here is the shadowing of the adjoining properties and therefore the height of the roof? Seems to me, having regard to the inspection that we did some time ago and my general civil engineering thinking, this whole development can be lowered. That is, so you're then reducing the height of the roof effectively from the natural surface level. It's not an impossibility. I mean, you can have retention down onto a site if it's lowered, and that is you will have less problems with shadowing, that shouldn't be a real big problem to you, Mr Mayor. You'd be aware of what I'm talking about. In other words, you're dropping it down as you go down rather than up where it is now. I see that as a way of solving it, because otherwise I see that the departure on the width is more than minimum. So
Question.
That's the
Question is,
You
can
can now
it be
answer.
lowered in Mr Wilton's opinion? Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Mr Wilton.
Through the chair, this development is actually stepping down the land. It actually has been excavated into the site. Look, there's further excavation could occur, but again, as I said previously, we've got to deal with the applications before us this evening.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, my question was the variation, I think Councillor Halstead mentioned too, the variation, the width. So we're saying the standard was supposed to be 25. They don't even meet 21. What's it? 20.1. So that variation, how does that stack up, Mr Wilton, with regard to, could that be refused on the grounds that it didn't meet the standard, or how has that been assessed?
Mr Wilton, through you, Madam General Manager.
Through the chair, the standard within the DCP is 25 metres. The site is an existing site that does occupy a width of 20.735. Council staff have assessed that and believe that the proposal has merit given it's a constrained site. It is a DCP control, it is a guide, it can be varied, and Council has previously varied that control in other developments.
Thank you. Councillor Markwart.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Question for Mr Wilson through the chair. Do you believe there are any significant errors in your report, as were referred to earlier on, that would change or vary your recommendation substantially?
Thank you, Councillor Markwart. Through you, Madam General Manager. Mr
Through the chair, absolutely not.
That was absolutely not. That's that's the shortest answer for the night, Councillor Markwart. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Wilton, if we were minded to lower the development, so to send it back for lowering and flat roofs and so on, would a reduction in the number of dwellings have a significant effect on the sunlight and privacy issues?
Thank you. Mr Wilton, through you, General Manager.
Through the chair, look, I can't answer that question. What I can answer is that we have to deal with the application that's before us this evening. The applicant has already altered their plan to reduce the number of units from 8 to 7. Accordingly, any further reduction would have to be assessed on that basis.
Thank you. Councillors, you've heard the debates and the questions and fors and against. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, well, look, Mr Mayor, I'm minded to move that this matter be deferred tonight. I'd like to see the applicant come back. I think we've all got some concerns with regard to what this amenity is going to mean to the neighbours. So I think, councillors, we can genuinely ask, as I did ask the architect, obviously she's got to put it to her the owners that look at some mediation as far as the sunlight goes. So I'm happy to move that this matter be deferred tonight and that we ask for that consideration with regard to the overshadowing, the stepping down if possible, as Councillor Halstead suggested, and the change in the roof, as Councillor Turlin suggested, to improve the sunlight, because I know it meets the standard, Mr Mayor, but it's like 1.5 hours in the morning and 1.5 hours in the morning and 1.5 hours to meet that requirement. I think that's pretty onerous. I certainly wouldn't like to live like that, and I think we can get a better outcome if we do that. So I'm happy to move that way.
Okay, you've got a second.
With your reasons, also the number of dwellings we
Oh, well, no, I don't think so. I think at this stage they have reduced. We have heard that the floor space ratio is quite low. They have taken one off. I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is really the overshadowing and the and the amenity and the privacy issues, which hopefully can be addressed.
Councillor Scandrett.
Yes,
is there
well,
anybody
right.
speaking against the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. I'll go to, we're running very much behind, so unless there is a active debate, I'll just take two speakers for, and Councillor Turlin's got his light on, so I'll allow him to speak.
Okay, well, I think we a lot of us have concerns about this, as we have for others in that precinct. We've always ended up with less dwellings and less bulk and scale and more amenity being a big issue. So yes, I think that's the way forward, is to send it back. The architect's in the room listening to the issues, and the residents will then have another opportunity to put in submissions on that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Look, I see that the first 2 units, or the first block, could say is a pitched roof, which the intent then from the street is it's a pitched roof section. As you go down the driveway, you will not see any part of the rest of the roofs because it's too steep and you're looking up to 2-storey. That'll make the benefit into 29A, 29B, and 29C. So 27 and 29 could have, if that's where it goes, the pitched roof that's currently on the drawing, because it's on the flatter section at the top where the existing flat roof building is. It's only as it falls down the hill it seems to cause problems. So the intent from the street can be, as it's drawn, it's as you go down the hill, which will then throw the light back in, hopefully, to those other people with a redesign. So I would hope to think that the applicant will look at that proposal, if not the first block, at least, possibly the second block, because it's still flat then before it dives off. Might solve the problem.
Thank you. So no other speakers, so I'll put the recommendation that it stand deferred, subject to a review of the roofing, is basically what it's all about. So put that, all in favour. Everybody has to show their hand, please. Everybody hand up, carried unanimously, thank you. We go on to the 9.3, development application, continuing use of an advertising structure and display at Bong Bong Street, 6 310 to 18 Bong Bong Street, Bowral. Mr Scott Lee will address council in support of the development. Mr Lee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I was the applicant for the Section 8.2 review application that's before you tonight, but I'm speaking on behalf of the proponent of the advertising, Mr Thomas Farquhar of Seesaw Promotions. We welcome the recommendation for approval. However, I wish to raise 2 particular proposed conditions of consent that you may wish to reconsider. Firstly, condition 6, in our view, seeks to unreasonably restrict the hours that the advertising may operate. Finishing time proposed of 6 p.m. appears very restrictive, particularly when you consider the location of the sign overlooking the car park and in direct proximity to the Coles shopping centre that you will all know. It has the largest and brightest neon advertising sign in the Shire. 6 p.m. also is daylight for 6 months of the year, so turning it off at that point in time doesn't seem to be a fair impost. My client's sign's not of the scale or impact of the adjoining signage, and is no way detrimental to any adjoining property or adjacent street or public space. It may be, in our view, more reasonable to align the hours of operation of my client's sign to those of the Coles supermarket. When Coles says good night, we say good night. Secondly is condition 7. If council maintains this restriction, my client will continue to work towards securing appropriate clients for the sign. Condition 7 is that which seeks to restrict what you can actually advertise. However, we've always maintained that this restriction is unwarranted and in fact an unfair imposition. Council's role is in assessing the suitability of the location of the signage and assessing potential impacts of that, not on dictating content. The state policy for advertising, that is the primary assessment tool, is referenced heavily in the assessment report. The state policy makes it clear that it is not for the purpose of controlling content. The policy is about appropriate locations for signage, appropriate scale, avoiding impacts on amenity of both individual buildings and also on local areas, the streetscape and such. All of these issues have been assessed as being satisfactory. Seesaw Promotions is a locally based business whose objective is to promote local businesses. If council believes it needs to control content, perhaps a fair outcome would be to restrict signage use to only business and events occurring within the Shire. We believe that council's DCP provision that seeks to restrict content to advertising only for a purpose that is carried out on the land may have some merit and some be enforceable outside of the business zones of the Shire, such as when dealing with billboards in rural areas. But we believe it's perhaps counterproductive and an unfair restriction when you seek to impose it in the business zones, when on all other measures the advertising is appropriate. It is, after all, only one sign, and it's the technology that allows multiple messages to be displayed over time. This is actually, in our view, a much better outcome than having multiple signs only being able to display a single message. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions and answer those to the best of my ability if you have any.
Councillor Toole and then Councillor McLaughlin.
We noticed that a DA was lodged in April 2019, the 3rd of April, and it took 5 days, if you take the weekend out, 11 days, but 5 days, for it to be refused. Do you know the difference between the previous DA and this one? Was there much difference? The sign has been the same. Is it the...
Mr Lee, through you,
Councillor, the application is the same. The report, or the application currently before you is for 8.2 review, which is asking council to review its previous decision for the same DA, the applicant is entitled to rely on the same application, or they can amend it. We didn't amend it.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Just on the time, Mr Lee, with regard to I don't know, what time does Coles close? Do you know?
I think it's 9:10, maybe, perhaps 10, I didn't check, but it's later than 6 p.m.
10 o'clock, we've just been informed.
And it's, as you'd be aware, it's very bright.
The signs there till 10, right? Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Ward.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Question through Scott. Just on Coles again. How would you propose to do that, the tight Coles? If Coles shut early or extended the time, I mean, that'd be a little tricky. I'm just looking for
Thank you, Councillor. I was just suggesting that a fairer outcome in relation to the condition would be something like that. We'd be happy with a later time frame, like nominate 10 p.m. Happy.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Scandal.
Mr Mayor. Mr Lee, I've been asking for a review of the signage code for some time, as have other councillors. Do you think it's out of date?
I don't. I think that's a bit of a leading question.
Well, it's a yes or no? Yes, it hasn't been reviewed
no,
for a long
I
time.
won't allow that question. No, that is not fair to Mr Lee.
Okay. Well, how would you address other opportunities like this, where a retailer, for example, has these type of signs in their window promoting their store, and then runs a slide of products that they have bought from a wholesaler? Technically, the signage code would say the products from the wholesaler ad cannot be part of the thing. That's my point.
Okay.
My response would be, I think it's probably an opportunity for council to review or reconsider the basis for that part of the DCP, as to why it's there in the first place and whether it's achieving what it's set out to achieve, and how it might remain relevant or not in relation to technology moving forward. That's what I would suggest is needed.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I'll move the motion.
Thank you, Mr.
Recommendation.
Okay, so before you do, I think for just clarity, we'll ask Mr. Wilton to introduce this item because it has been controversial.
Through the Chair, the purpose of this report is to consider DA 200587, which seeks consent for the continued use of an advertising structure and display of advertising material at 310 to 318 Bongbong Street, Bowral. Councillors will be aware of the previous development application that was made on the 3rd of April 2019, which was later refused due to concerns relating to departures to Council's DCP controls and also amenity concerns relating to the proposal. A Section 8.2A review was later lodged in September 2019, and Council was unable to determine that application as it was statutorily barred, being outside the 6-month determination period permitted under the Act. The site is Zone B2 local centre and advertising structures are permitted with development consent. And Council's DCP controls do, however, restrict the display of advertising material that do not relate to the approved use of the land. The current proposal seeks to retain the existing structure and continue to operate the sign in its current format in the manner in which it has been operated prior to Council undertaking compliance actions following a complaint from a member of the public. The proposal has been neighbour notified and no submissions have been received on this occasion, and Council staff are of the view that the proposal is supportable, providing that conditions of development consent are applied which restrict the time to which the sign is utilised and also the advertising content. Accordingly, Council staff recommended approval to subject to conditions.
Thank you. Councillor Turland, you're moving the recommendation. Is there any question to Mr Wilton?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Oh, okay. So
I
there's
think Councillor Hanson seconded.
two questions. Through you, Councillor Turland. Mr Wilton.
The 82A review, you mentioned 6 months. Was it the fault of the applicant not lodging it quick enough, or was it the time period that ran out after the Section 82A review was requested that meant a whole new DA had to come back on the platform?
Through you, Deputy General Manager, Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, Council is required under the Act to determine an application within 6 months of the date in which the original proposal was determined by way of refusal. The issue is with this, it was actually submitted to Council in September, and the date for the expiry of this application was October. Obviously there's certain statutory processes that need to be followed in relation to that, and also notification process which would occur. Unfortunately, we're outside that time period and we're statutory barred from determining it.
That doesn't...
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yep, with regard to, and you see a lot of these around, I understand that this actual sign had been operating somewhere else and that it came to the attention due to a complaint. So I take it that if we hadn't had a complaint, we wouldn't have been, would have continued on, as a lot of them do. Do we have a proactive program where we notify people before, so that they know what the signage policy should be before they, you know, basically break the law?
Then we will, through you, Mr Paul, Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, Council acts on reactive inquiries, so if someone lodges a complaint with Council, generally we'll go out and deal with it. On the odd occasion, we do have a proactive compliance campaign where we do write to certain industry officials relating to, for instance, real estate agents, where, you know, signs are being regularly erected. In relation to this, I'm not going to comment on the compliance aspects, but the applicant was requested to turn the light off, or turn the sign off. Unfortunately, that didn't occur on this occasion.
Okay, so we have a recommendation moved by Councillor Turland, seconded by Councillor Halstead. Councillor Turland.
Okay, I mean, here we go again. The guy lodged the DA, same day he lodges the DA, he gets a fine for $6,000. Then we go off to the local court, and it goes through a whole complete mess there. End up costing $11,000 for the kid to now come back to the same DA, same documents, and get approved. Now the fact is, nobody could find the DCP sign code in 270 pages in the Bowral DCP. And when he went to Council, he informed me, nobody could tell him where to find it, and therefore he didn't know what he had to provide. So that went on for a few weeks back and forwards, trying to work out. This kid's never lodged a DA before in his life. He's trying to work out what he's had to do. The sign's been up for 2 years prior to that in a different location, not a question. So he's got a business and he keeps running it. The same day he finally gets the documents to lodge the DA, he then gets hit with a $6,000 fine. And here we are now, a different staff member recommend approval. Now, if it went to the Land and Environment Court in the first refusal, the magistrate that gave him the $11,000 fine was costs against Council that he had to pay for. The Land and Environment Court would have been all over this like a rash. They would have understood it. The local magistrate would not have understood a local government law process. He was dealing with a fine. And that was the biggest issue here. We didn't have to go there. Hence the reason why last year in December I had the request for the mediation of an ombudsman, where the two parties can get together and talk about the issues before it blows up to where it is today. This one could have been dealt with that ombudsman process in place. So you just don't have two people at arm's length saying, we're just going to fight each other for no reason. Well, I don't understand the issues, so who do I go to? It could have been solved quickly without spending $11,000 of kids' money. Now, as for the 6 o'clock closing, I don't know where the hell that comes from. As I said, Coles open up to 10 o'clock, and the car park after 6 o'clock is probably only a quarter full. Well, we need to fix these tables so we're actually spread them out so we can have a look.
Yeah, I take your
I've asked that question before. 6 o'clock, I think we should change the motion. We'll add to this in a minute if with the seconder's approval that we actually change it to 10 o'clock or even 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And if you've got a problem with it, we could run it for 12 months to see if there's an issue. But you've got to remember the Barrel car park, or the back behind that with the Coles, there's going to be nobody there. Springett's is closed, that arcade's closed. It's only going to be people going to Coles, which is on the other car park. I can't see it saying going to offend anybody. And it be used for the good purposes, because it can also be used for non-for-profit local groups representing. For instance, council used to advertise on the sign when it went to court. Council advertised on this sign.
I think that needs clarification, Councillor Turland.
Well, I don't think we can. How are you going to get the clarify?
I think that's been raised before, and it was, and I don't know, but I think it was advertised on that site, but council didn't request it. That's how I understand it.
Somebody within the council system.
I might stand to be corrected, but that's my understanding.
Community event it was, but anyway. Anyway, look, over the fire period, the young fellow made contact with the Rural Fire Service and local commander, and guess what he put up on the sign? So everybody could see all the issues, the app you could go to, what was happening, you know, where the emergency services were, who you could ring. And was that not an asset to the Shire? That asset should have been left on from day one and not cost the kid $11,000.
Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, we've talked about in this chamber before about having village signs that promote community matters of interest, signs, emergency issues such as Councillor Turles just talked about. This seems to fit right into that, but I continue to say, where is our signage code? Where is the updated, relevant, easy to find information sheets at the desk, all of that? It appalls me that this runs around in that no man's land where we seem to move the goalposts at time. I'd like to see an addition here, Councillor Turland, if you would accept it, that we revise the signage code, this is with your permission, Councillor Halstead, within the next 6 months. Because quite frankly, we need to give clarity to this, and if we're going to also look at emergency signs, village signs and the like, this might come into play. It doesn't have to be an electronic sign, all signs have to comply. So that's in. Thank you very much.
Councillor Mark Ward.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I believe we do have a policy on this already, and I think it's reasonably clear. It may not be well known, but it is certainly on the website. So, but I don't have a problem with having the policy reviewed and such like. That's not a problem. I do have a problem extending it to 10 p.m. I'm not a fan of illuminated signs, certainly not flashing ones. I know this isn't flashing. I would certainly prefer to leave it at, I'd say no later than 8, and I won't support 10 p.m. As far as I'm concerned, I like to see less lights, less flashing lights, and less advertising. It's not a pretty place, the car park, and I don't think this would enhance it. There aren't many people there really that interested in my view, and I just don't like illuminated signs, I have to say. So I'll support it till 8 p.m, but not 10.
Councillor Halstead.
Yes, look, I'm
Thank
happy
you,
to second
Councillor
that. I'll
Mark
also agree too if the mover of the motion does the item with respect to reviewing the signage code. I think that's probably reasonable. Let me go to the wider debate.
I'm sorry, can you turn, I called, yeah, that's better. Yeah, thank you.
That might have been down like that.
Yeah, I
Then you can
have
see it.
trouble. I think people might be having a little bit of trouble
Look,
hearing.
It's as simple as this. The statement made by Councillor Turland there is accurate. Had that gone to the Land and Environment Court, it would have been laughed out, in my opinion, from experience. And I think I've had a bit more, at least the equal, to some people sitting around here that have been to the court. Went to a local court and was based on another process, we'll say, under the Local Government Act. And this person ended up with a fine of $11,000. Quite frank, that's despicable, but it happened. I mean, we didn't make that decision, the court did. How pathetic is it? And now we have the application in to do exactly the same thing, and it's going to be approved, and so it should be. And quite frankly, I'm not offended by the 10 p.m, because I think I go to Coles more often than you do, Councillor Mark Ort, and it's probably late at night when I get a chance. And where that is, wouldn't offend me at all. And I'm very much pro the environment, within reason, and that's most cases. But that one is not an offensive sign. It's not enormous. And Technicolor, great. It's not the standard one like we see on the side of a highway every now and again, but I think it's a great pity it's come to this, but that is the answer. This must get an approval, and quite frank, 10 p.m, I don't think there's a problem with it at all. I mean, in the old days, I'd have probably gone along with your 8. Well, I'm a bit, yeah, not that long back. But being a reality, and where it is, and it's really right in the commercial area, can only be seen from one direction, effectively. I mean, who the hell's going to object to it? I can't imagine anybody objecting to that, still flashing at 10 p.m. Because you're only going to see it if you come out of Coles or in a car park between Coles and that location, and you'd have to go, oh, yeah, there might be a sign up here, I'll have a look around. I mean, it was a nonsense that it went down the way that it did before. Quite annoyed about what happened there, but I think that's the go, and I certainly support it.
Thank you. Now, is there anybody, everybody wants to have a bit of a word on this. It was a bit controversial. Councillor Whipper.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to support the recommendation, although I do have an affinity with some of the comments that were made by Councillor Markwood. I believe 10 o'clock is excessive. I'd be happier if it was 8 o'clock. The difference between Coles and this sign is that Coles is open. People can actually access the building while it's open to secure groceries and essentials. We're talking about a sign, so I don't think the comparison is the same. I think 8 o'clock would be more acceptable, given that even during daylight savings, 8 o'clock seems to be a time when it starts to get darker. So though I support it in general, I thought for many years about preserving our night skies and non-spill lighting. So based on a principle, I'd support the recommendation, but only if it allowed that cut-off at 8 p.m.
Can we seem to get a unanimous agreement here and bring it back 1 hour, so it's not 8, it's not 10, it's 9? Is that a fair enough sort of, you know, I mean, we're splitting. Yeah. I mean, it's to me the time is a bit irrelevant, but if we can do that so we get a unanimous feeling. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll try and help you. I agree with both Councillor Whipper and Councillor Markwood. If they're willing to move, I will, but I agree with both of those. 8 o'clock, I think it's fair. So I support 8 o'clock.
Okay, I don't want to see this being a split vote. I mean, I get the message across. Councillor Scandrick.
Mr Mayor, I did say that report come back on signage provisions within the DCP within 6 months. And of course, the staff might need to tell me it's 5 months because of the end of this term. What date would the staff like through you? Okay, well, we'll ask that. Well, why don't you just say before the end of this term? Yes, for consideration before the end of this term. Before the end of this term.
You want to speak first?
No, look,
I've only got a quick few things to say if I can. For instance, if this sign from 8 o'clock was just left with one picture, exactly like the sign beside it, with one picture, selling pizzas or whatever it might be, chemist gear, electric sign, it would stay open and on to 10 o'clock. It's only because this might change 3 or 4 times within the hour that we're saying we're going to restrict the time. But the one right next door, just saying chemist, an illuminated sign, will stay to 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock. Chevalier's just got a DA approval for a sign. An electric mobile, well, it's not a mobile, it's a fixed sign. And it's on all the time. We didn't even know it happened until it was built. What's the controversy here? In a car park that you're going at 5 kilometres an hour, on a sign right next door to it, that's left on forever. And we're saying because this one moves a bit, we're going to say we restrict his time. Doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm happy if the second happened to move it to 9. And I would think probably after 12 months, he could put a variation if there's no issue. There's never been a complaint in this already. There's not one complaint that came in from the DA. So I think we're splitting hairs.
Thank you. Okay, so we brought it back to 9 and I think you'll get it unanimous. Can that all in favour? So please raise your hand. 9. All in favour? All in favour except Councillor Whipper, who's gone for, who's disagreed with the hour. Okay, we now move back to the...
hang on, Mr Mayor, sorry, just one... I did ask, there was just one item on page 187 to be brought forward. We've got people...
No, can we get... Yeah, I'll tell you what we agreed.
Oh, didn't we agree that way?
Yeah, well...
You agreed, councillors, to suspend standing orders, to listen to Miss Aitken. That has happened. We were again going to deal with all of the visitor items. That has happened. You were then going to bring forward the rescission motions. That has yet to happen.
Sorry.
And then you were going to deal with item 15.1.
All right. So that was what I put to the meeting, and that is what was agreed to. So we now go back to the rescission motion in relation to Orchard Street, Colo Vale. We've heard the public forum. We are now in, unless you have any questions to council staff in relation to this item, we are now in, it's up to council. Councillor Scandrett.
I'd like to speak, but could Michelle get those slides up that Ms White had, and I'll speak then.
Can I just ask a question to the staff?
You can ask a question while that's coming up.
Under the senior set, the process is a deferred management fee or a strata sale process, is it not? You're not sure?
Through the chair, I can't comment on that.
No answer, okay. Normally the deferred management fee in the senior living, it has to be a strata because there's multiple buildings, so it's got to be a strata.
Okay, so we're having, no, that's one. That's.
I'll start there whilst the others. Yeah. That. Okay.
Well, we are debating the fact of the rescission motion, and the rescission motion is that the motion that was passed for approval be rescinded. That is what we are initially.
And I'm a signature to that, and I'm now going to speak to that, Mr. Mayor.
No, the rescission motion has been moved and seconded by councillor who moved it. Councillor Scandrett. Who else signed it? Councillor Whipper. So they're the movers and seconders. And that's been done prior to this being lodged.
It's a rescission motion, so it
I know, Councillor. I'm just explaining for members of the public who may not be as familiar. Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that photo of the dwelling opposite, which has the dormer windows, which was referred to when we visited the site as being an example of two-storey construction in the street. Maybe there's about half a dozen two-storey homes in this precinct, but none of them are like the block of flats that we're looking at here with this SEP 5 development. I mean, it just doesn't fit the character of Colo Vale. Colo Vale is a sleepy little town, village with no hard edges on the curbs, no gutters, soft edges to the road, highly vegetated, and it's a very country feel, as we heard before. It's not dissimilar to Winslow and Penrose in the south, and of course in the North Hilltop and Balmoral. The difference here, of course, is that this is the thin end of the wedge. Now, the applicant said it when we brought this to council that this was about a demand for seniors housing, and that can be addressed simply by making this a one-storey development, still having that villa feel, or those units, if you wish, but not that. Yes, thank you. See, that is the view directly opposite the councillors, the view of the little house with the chalet top to it. Across the road, we're going to have literally wall to wall with a driveway down one side, sawtooth roofed block of flats. There's going to be 4 or 5 cars here. One of the car spaces doesn't even comply at this point in time. That hasn't been remedied. But I'm on about the character of the village, and that is in the future going to become a very big issue up here, neighbourhood character and feel. Same at other villages I mentioned, and also out at Robertson, for example, where people are going to find that we've got to find housing solutions that fit in with the character. This does not fit in with the character of Colo Vale, not by any approach. Now, it's in the courts. Anyone who thinks that refusing this rescission motion today is going to save council money is in the wrong boat, because this is on its way, because the neighbourhood, believe it or not, the neighbourhood have taken this up and have lodged in the court. Now, I find that just very strong pointer to the objections in the village to this monstrosity. So, councillors, on amenity, bulk, scale, access, loss of trees, overshadowing the house to the left on the corner, overviewing the houses behind and to the other side, the fact it doesn't conform with the other houses in the street, and that street shot there, please, Michelle, that one is just probably the best one in the lot, because it shows the character looking down the road. This doesn't fit it. And I should say that anyone who ran in the election in 2016 said, I'm going to be there to preserve the character of the northern villages, I'm going to look after the streetscape, I'm going to look after the people there. And the people in this room know who I'm talking about here, what I'm talking about, because some of you have put your hands up and said, yes, we're going to stand against this because it's not part of what Colavale means. So tonight is the night to do that, because we're going to the court no matter what.
Through the chair, please, Councillor Skinner. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I haven't changed my mind on this. I voted against this last time. And I'll vote against it. I'll vote with the rescission motion. Look, I think this was all well enunciated earlier this evening by the President of Colavale. Basically, all the arguments she put forward, if you're going to have seniors living in a village, people with disabilities in a village without hardly any amenities, I find it difficult. There's no footpaths. You know, there's not a doctor, it's got nothing. It's got a very tenuous sort of occasional bus, one bus in and then maybe you get one back in the afternoon. I mean, this was put in by the state government and the idea was that you did have infrastructure for people, not an idea where developers can take advantage. And this is what we're seeing here. They're just taking advantage
be careful. Be careful of your.
Okay, all right. My language is I think they are. I believe that. I believe.
No, I would suggest you retract all of that, please, Councillor McLaughlin.
Okay, all right. In my opinion, I believe the state government put this in, right, for it to be useful. I know people have got the opportunity to age in place. That's fine. That's fine, and they can. And as they find they age, they might want to move into other centres. I think to stay in outlying villages is great if you've got support, if you've got that infrastructure, as we've heard, this village doesn't have at this stage. So I'll be supporting the rescission motion.
Thank you. Councillor Turland.
Yeah, well, look, set 55 is people over 55 years old. Not one person sitting here is under 55. And we have any disability? No, we don't. This is just not for the purpose of people who are ageing, but it's for people who want to capitalise on their asset, still stay in their village that they've grown up in and had their asset, and downsize to something so they can use the rest of their cash in their property that they've owned for 20, 30 years to move on and go and do something, go on holidays, whatever it might be. Anyway, it is a state SEP that allows this to happen now. We've actually clarified it, as the Mr Wilton has said before at the previous council meeting, where before council used the process of the state guidelines, now we've actually adopted the state guidelines within this area. This will not be the last one. There will be more because the state wants this to happen. And, I don't think we should be, we're now all becoming architects now. We think we can all design on what we think is right and wrong. Councillor McLaughlin, please. And so I think that, I don't know this, but I'd imagine the council staff have actually had some input into the design of this building over a period of time. Maybe it had a pitched roof. Maybe it was turned into a flat roof, which is what we just talked about in Oxley Drive. So I don't think if we refuse this, We are in the court system at the moment on the previous DA, and it's been held off at the moment. But it's not the applicant taking us to court, it's an objector taking the council to court and the applicant. And you've got to remember, council staff have approved twice. It should be approved. And the list of these items here, I don't think you're going to have the weight that you guys think you're going to have in a court of order.
Thank you, Councillor Turl. And Councillor Whipper?
Mr Mayor, I'm supporting the rescission motion. Like Councillor McLaughlin, I believe that our villages are under threat. All we hear around this table, or the majority of arguments we hear around the table, are based on commerce. What I'd like to hear is some social commentary around the table occasionally. The fact that people make decisions to move into villages, unlike towns, they know what they're moving into, and they do that at some considerable, if not commercial expense, they do that at some expense to themselves in terms of isolation, transport, a whole host of things. But the choice is there, they make that choice. And they make it knowingly that should they reach a stage in their life where they need more supported services or more intense services, they would have to move to a more centralised location to actually take advantage of that. What are we prescribing here? That eventually every village in the Shire will have its own little age facility, doctors, high schools, universities, so that nobody ever has to leave a village? I mean, they're lame arguments, Mr Mayor. And I think the important thing is that we look at the Shire and the characteristics of this Shire and the fact that it is quite unique. Most people, irrespective of what they would have in their village, would travel to Bowral, Mittagong or Mossvale for shopping anyway. We have a number of people who go out of the Shire down to the coast or up to Campbelltown to do their shopping. It's just the way it is. So these commercial arguments really don't sort of mean as much to me as a layperson as those arguments about quality of life and living in a village and making those choices when we have other people's expectations foisted upon us. I live in a village, I know how important and how unique that is. So I think we need to acknowledge that. And it's good to see a bit of people power, because it's the people, the court of public opinion, I think, Mr Mayor, is more important than our court system at times. And I think it's about time we listened and valued that. We've got these proposals coming forward for character statements for the Shire and housing strategies. I've got my own opinions about that. I'll talk about that at the appropriate time. But I think everybody in this room in this Shire knows what the character of this Shire is and what they want to maintain. And certainly villages are part of that expectation.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Councillor Mark Ward.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I also, like Councillor Turl, take a little bit, I don't know if the word of offence is strong enough, but being over 55 is not a disability. I'd like to think...
Should be 75,
Councillor Mark Ward has the floor.
So I think that's a little harsh on most of us here. I know some people believe some councils have disabilities of various sorts, perhaps in various ways, but I think 55 is not a disability per se. I, like Councillor Whipper, look at this in a social sense, but I think I disagree with Councillor Whipper on this. I see we need more diversity throughout our whole Shire, including the villages. We need places where people can grow old or become over 55 and older and basically stay in their community. And this is one step in that direction. It's not ideal, but we do need that sort of service. We have an ageing population, an ageing community. If people wish to stay in their own community, they need these sorts of facilities. I've constantly supported this, and generally I support things like what do you call them, boarding houses and things like that. I think they are the only solution we have available to us to move forward at this stage until the state government gets its act together. They need to get their act together, but till then we need these solutions because we have to meet the future needs and our current needs of the people in our community, especially the ones who are getting a little older. So I will be supporting, as I have before, this, not the rescission motion, the original motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mark Ward. And Councillor Halstead.
I'm very happy to hear that the community have taken action in the court on this one, because I think it's totally out of character on a whole lot of issues. But I won't tell you what I really think it looks like, but certainly it's ugly, the proposal. If that was single story, I don't think there'd be anyone here complaining about it. The development type is probably reasonable, but the scale of this and all those reasons mentioned by Councillor Scandrett are totally appropriate from the point of view of knocking this one over ASAP. So I'm virtually telling you now, definitely telling you now, I'm in favour of the rescission motion.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm speaking against the rescission motion. I've followed this right through from its inception and supported it. Sometime in late 18, early 19, the applicant carried out his due diligence on this site and found out he was able to develop it as he has, and provided a DA, placed at the council, and it was ultimately sometime in July last year approved by this council. Prior to that, he made a significant number of compromises to the original proposal. So he's done everything correct in regard to getting it so it satisfied staff, and it satisfied this council in July last year. Through no fault of his own, it's been explained here and in this chamber, and most people behind me would be aware, through no fault of the applicant, this has been presented again to hopefully avoid court action, which will cost, one way or another, will cost this council. So he has a right. You know, he's a young developer, it's his second development, it's a family organisation, a family company, he has a right. He purchased the property, he provided a DA that suits, that complies in every area which has been explained by Mr Wilton. I emphasise again, he has a right to continue. We shouldn't be dealing with these people, their livelihood. The argument that a developer is in it for making money is a hell of a risk in these type of developments, and if he comes out of it and the yield's strong, good on him. We need more people like him.
Thank you. And before your right of reply, we had a presentation this morning, long-term vision for the Shire in relation to development and whatever, and one of them was the balancing act on how we can maintain the lifestyle that people move here for and what we have to offer. And Councillor Mark Ward made the comment, and did Councillor Turlin, in relation to the age of people who are going to want to stay in their village, and maybe their house is too big, maybe their house might need to be major renovated, and they don't want to do it, and they can sell. And in 10 years' time, there's something like 70%, and I haven't got the figure in front of me, is going to be over 55 years old.
No.
That's not very far...
70.
70 years old. That's not very far away. And there are a lot of people in the villages who are ageing, as much as anywhere else in the Shire. And they have, and as has been pointed out, they have the right to stay in that village. They shouldn't be forced out if they don't want to. The state government, as Councillor McLaughlin pointed out, they were the ones who put the impost on it. And this developer has taken the advantage of that change in the state legislation, not council's legislation, and then, as Councillor Andrews has pointed out, has met every requirement necessary and has worked with council to try and achieve that. I've supported this since inception, and I believe if I change my vote now, it would be a lack of what I believe in relation to people being able to live in the community that they have built in and bought in and lived in. And if other people want to take advantage of that, good on them, and so I won't be supporting overturn the decision. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, I'm disappointed in that because I've seen you out in the villages recently, and of course you've been very focused on restoring the character of our villages and the amenity of our villages. This is a loophole. Be very clear on it, everyone. This is simply driving through a loophole. You cannot build two-storey blocks of flats in Colla Vale except under this SEP, and it shouldn't be there. And this state government should be condemned for this because they're buggering up a very nice street. This is what this is.
Can you retract the word buggering up, please?
They're totally destroying the amenity of this street. And we're yet to do neighbourhood character statements here. In fact, Councillor Whipper and I were only talking about these the other day. They're the core to what we're doing in our villages, let alone our towns. And as we start looking at investigating for other greenfield areas, of which there's one not far from here, again, this is the big issue. Keeping the character of our towns. Colla Vale, if that gets up for investigation, Wensleydale, it's going to double in size. How the hell is that going to be acceptable in terms of a character statement in that village? Now, I looked at some people's electoral material from the last election where people said quite clearly, councillors said quite clearly that they were going to preserve the amenity of the villages. Ensure all planning applications that comply and fit within the ambience of the Highlands are dealt with responsibly to avoid significant court costs was one. Well, this is on its way to court. I think, quite frankly, it should be reversed today so that the court costs are minimised, because if this motion gets up tonight, and it's going to be on your casting vote, sir, I'm going to be adding to it, single storey would be acceptable because the community have said that loud and clear, and the councillors who are not supporting this rescission motion, what's the problem with single storey? Single storey, SEP 5, maximises the use of the block and achieves the social outcomes that you're seeking. It doesn't have to be two-storey. It can be single storey and can snug into the street appropriately. The residents' opposition, which has led to the LEC court battle on this, is clearly showing that the community is very worried about the future of Colla Vale. I mean, it's extraordinary. The community is running a court action, which we're now involved in. So whatever you think about, we're not going to be involved in it, councillors, we are. So third thing, of course, is that the Community Association, you've heard the President tonight, is totally opposed to this because it destroys the neighbourhood character and doesn't work for all the reasons I've put in the notice of motion that would arise. I mean, quite frankly, I think as we go forward, will some of you councillors be able to walk around Colla Vale with your head held high if this thing gets built? Quite frankly, I think it's the most ugly thing I've ever seen. It's a block of flats. A single storey villa or SEP 5 development could deliver a reasonable outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay.
Down to you.
You had the, you summed up. So there's no more speakers.
I was just going to say it's not a block of flats, and it keeps on saying that statement.
Okay. Then we put all those in favour of the rescission motion, please raise your hand. Councillor Scandrett, Whipper, Halstead and McLaughlin. Those against, Councillors Turland, Andrews, Markwart and Gare. And it went 5-4 last time. I'll use my casting vote in favour, and the rescission motion is defeated. The motion stands. Thank you, Councillor. We now move on to the... Excuse me, Councillor Scandrett. Can we have the... we have a rescission motion into development application 190922 31 lot subdivision. We've had the public forum. Could I ask any questions to staff before? Any questions to staff? No questions to Councillor Andrews?
Sorry. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just simply questioning the trees that are internal on the property at the moment. I've had a look at it. I'm not an expert on trees, but can someone explain to me who determined that they should or could be all removed, please?
Thank you. Councillor, through you, Madam GM, to Mr Wilton.
Through the Chair, an arborist report has been submitted with the application, which identifies that all the trees on the site will be removed. As I explained to councillors recently when we went out and visited the site doing a site inspection, is that whilst the actual floor plate or the master plan of the site can be amended in order to incorporate vegetation on the actual land itself, one of the concerns I have is that once dwellings or dwelling applications are submitted to council, relative services associated with those dwellings will likely impact on tree root zones and cause further issues.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Yep. Thank you, Mr Mayor. With regard through you, Madam GM, to Mr Wilton, I understand there's something like 4 trees per block that are going to be provided with this development. Is there an opportunity, as we saw when we were out there, we've got quite a large setback from the frontage road there, where I believe there's one power pole going to a little old cottage, sorry, that'll probably be removed. I just think there's an opportunity, Mr Wilton. It seems to be concern about loss of trees that we impose. And I know there's a landscape thing coming, but is there an opportunity for us to ask for larger trees to be used in this development, so that we get a quick response and a quick coverage of the that site after all the trees are gone?
I take your question, Councillor McLaughlin. I've got to remind councillors that we are dealing with a rescission motion and not necessarily conditions of consent. So the argument tonight is, should the matter be rescinded? And that's what we're debating. The questions to the staff are in relation to that. So if there's no more questions, we have a mover and seconder, which is automatic in relation to councillors Scandrett and Whipper will be the mover and seconder, if that's in order, from the mover and seconder, unless you want to, somebody else wants to drop off it.
It's Councillor Whipper and Scandrett.
Okay, so move Councillor Whipper, second Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Whipper.
Thank you. So, councillors, we had this come before us at the last meeting. I raised a number of issues around the site, particularly in relation to the removal of all trees on site, and the fact that, in my opinion, a developer could easily incorporate those significant trees, or some of those significant trees, into the development and to make it a better outcome as well. I also raised the issue about the story behind the Ferguson's nursery, the fact that the association goes back to John MacArthur with Ferguson Nurseries, and the fact that a lot of those trees that were planted on site in the early, I believe, 30s could have well been remnants from, or clippings taken from that MacArthur estate. I just can't believe, councillors, that in this day and age, when we hear so much of a concern from the community about our Shire, its environment, its vegetation, habitat for our wildlife, that we can allow every tree on a site, which is quite considerably treed at the moment, just to be just raped, basically, of all vegetation on the site. I think that's going back a long way, and I spoke before about the community and the Court of Public Opinion, and I believe the Court of Public Opinion is definitely against this sort of wholesale slaughter of our environment. Why we can't take a breath and ask the applicant to go and redesign the site to incorporate, to acknowledge and to respect some of the vegetation on that site is beyond me. It can be done, and we've got the power, councillors, to do that. Not only the power, but the responsibility to do that on behalf of this community. It's not rocket science. And I'm sorry if I believe that some developers look at getting their maximum bang out of the buck for everything they develop. I'm sorry if people are offended by that, but I'm offended by developers who just want to destroy everything and get as much development out of a site that they can. I'm offended by that, and I'm sure other people in this community are offended by that as well. So we can't cry into handkerchiefs because we're destroying commercial opportunities for a developer, and then on the other hand, you know, just ignore the voice of the community when they've got genuine concerns and they want to protect the characteristics of the Shire. So councillors, I'm not saying no, don't develop this site. Nobody's that ignorant to believe it's not going to be developed, but it needs to be developed, I think, in a way that's sensitive and respectful, not only to the area, but to our environment as well. And there's no doubt that these trees some of these are quite significant. They're not rubbish trees. they're not Pinus radiata. These are trees of significance on that site. Now, any developer that can't incorporate that into a development design needs to maybe think they're in the wrong business.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Councillor Turlin.
Renwick, not one tree left, totally gone. Why? Because they were dangerous. And you can't have a huge tree in a 600 square metre lot right next to a house that you've just approved to be built. And it's quite clear that when you do the roadworks, the sewer, the water, the plumbing, we all know that's going to tear up the roots of those evergreen pines that are there. Let alone the one tree I think that has some merit, which is the deodar, but the top's broken out of it and it's regrowing. So it really has no value really. It's only a matter of time before it falls apart. So there's no way, looking at the trees and the structure that's in there at the moment, that anybody could make, I don't know, maybe even a quarter of the lots if you had to leave the evergreens down in the middle of the lot because there's another pack of evergreens at the back of it. So in my view, if you look at what happens in subdivisions, they have to clean fell and then bring up the new trees that suit the environment after the services are gone in and ripped all the roots up. To be honest with you, I think it's down Highland Way, the site on the east. That is going to be a problem in years to come for council. Same as Mary Street. Those eucalypts will end up falling over on the houses that are going to be built behind it. But that's another story. We're going to keep those. We're told that they're going to be kept. But I think they should be come out and planting that meets today with our street tree master plan should be adapted. Not something that was done 80, 90, 100 years ago, which is at its end of its life. We need to wake up and move forward because otherwise, on a 600 square metre lot, how are you going to build a house with a tree that's like this, it's full of possums, let alone catching on fire with one little spark, boom, gone. And then we've got to pull it down around houses. This rescission motion, and I think by memory, the last time that was put forward, it was a deferred. I think that was right, was it, Councillor? You'd wanted a deferred
Yeah, it was a deferred commencement.
Yeah, and we can't actually have that in.
I think it was, wasn't it?
No, I'm just asking. That's what I'm asking you for.
I was asking for a redesign.
Oh, yeah, sorry. You're yes.
Okay,
yes,
well, that's
it
what I
was
was
at
just
a-
trying to
Sorry,
get
Councillor
clarified.
Whipper,
Anyway, at this point in time, as I said, look at Renwick. New trees in the street, around the houses, much better than leaving old ones that are at the end of their life. Otherwise, you're going to pay, somebody's going to pay a lot of money later on to pull them out right next to a house, which is ludicrous.
Thank you, Councillor Turlin. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think Councillor Turlin's correct on this matter, and I do hear what Councillor Whipper says. It's nice to keep trees, but you know, the state government looks at us, and we've got to provide housing for our community. How do we do that? And I think to try and fit in houses around. Look, this site went from 44 blocks, and council put the pressure on themselves. You know, it's too small. Went to 31. Now they've already come up with a plan on the landscaping of something like 4 trees per block. So there's going to be a lot of trees, and all the trees behind that block, they've taken. They're not going to have access off that street, so all those street trees stay. So there will be trees at the back of that, at the reserve, between the railway, is it, or the back of the railway line there. So it's not as if we're losing all the trees that look on the site. But on the site where they're building, I think it's very hard to say. As Councillor Turlin said, you go onto a site to develop it, you put new trees in the right spot, rather than having trees that are probably at the end of their life that are undermined by, you know, putting in all the things you've got to put in, all the services you've got to put in these days, Mr Mayor. So even that, look, I'd love to see the trees stay, but what do? you say no development and we just leave everything there, well, that's not going to happen. As Councillor Whippers knows, we've got to have development, we've got to provide, as the state government requires us to do, planning for our community. So I think this site can benefit, as I tried to sort of suggest earlier, to Mr Welton and to our planning staff, that we do look at advanced species of trees and the right trees, because you know the trees that are there now aren't really friendly to our native animals. They're all exotic trees, I think. But to put native trees back in, or the right type of tree in that area, and as I suggested earlier, we've got a large setback there that I think it's on a reserve there that we could really make it a nice area with some good planting. So I'm sorry I can't support this rescission motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Markwart.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much. I remember meeting some residents down there a year or two ago, I think, when this first was being explored, and their main concern was access to these new blocks. And that has been addressed by the developer, so I must congratulate the developer for coming part of the way towards councils and the residents' requirements there. I'm quite conflicted on this one, really, because I do obviously have a fondness for trees, but I think some of the trees there are not really that spectacular myself. And I recognise also the other point that we're under pressure from the state government for more housing. There's absolutely no way we can say no to everything. And really, on balance, I think if we don't go ahead with these sorts of sites, I think we're going to have more pressure very much in the near future. We're going through a draft housing strategy right now, and I can just see more pressure being put on that if we don't go ahead with these. So on balance, I think I will be opposing the rescission motion as such and supporting the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Markwart. Councillor Scandrett.
I'm not a patsy for the state government, Mr Mayor. State government can have policies, but I'm there for the community. And the community have said loud and clear they have concerns about this. And yes, it's been addressed, it's in scale. And yes, the access is now more tight. I worry when you've got 3 cars per household quite often in these sort of situations, because this is not a seniors living or anything where there's some age restriction. This could have families in it, and they might have teenagers with cars. So suddenly you're going to have those narrow streets filled up. It's a continuing concern I have, Councillor. In some of our more compact estates, and that's what this is. That's what this is. It's a small estate. It's great for train lovers. I think they're going to love this spot. But one of the issues, and you raised it quite succinctly, I thought, Councillor McLaughlin, is the fact that we have all these developments and they have no tree cover on them. And the trees that are planted are small saplings, if that, instead of mature. I've been saying all this time, let's have mature plantings. Let's make sure that they're watered as part of the system for the house. Let's make sure they're not just 2 in the front and 2 out the back and 1 on the curb. Let's make sure it's a bit more significant than that. Because, councillors, it was only in this chamber that we passed a climate change resolution recently, and nobody's addressed that. And one of those things is reduction of hard surfaces, increasing shade and other things. There's no mention of that in this particular plan. I mean, had we successfully, were this to be successfully rescinded, certainly those are some of the things I'd like to be addressing. What are the colour of the roofs, for example? What sort of materials are being used in the driveways and paths? What sort of plantings? What sort of shade cover? And so on is going to be addressed. And I include the curb as part of that, Mr Mayor, because there's a lot of people around here who are finding it a little bit warmer lately. So if you're going to park your car somewhere, maybe your electric car, maybe under a bit of shade might be a good thing. Well, let's see where the future goes on that. But councillors, this is a matter of sending it back for a redesign. We've now got the right density. Now we're looking for refinements, particularly around the trees cover on that. I don't think it's too much to ask.
Thank you. And who moved it? Councillor Whipper was the mover. So before your right of reply, I will not be supporting the rescission motion. I feel that the conditions of consent that we put in last week will address the loss of and as Councillor McLaughlin pointed out, keeping the tree buffer between that block and the neighbours. And I know the neighbours realise there's going to be a development there of some sort. I think that is probably one of the most important things, and to make sure that the traffic, when the vehicles are coming in, that council make sure that they do not use large vehicles to access that street, that they bring them off another avenue. So in relation to that, I will be supporting the position as council has taken, and hand back to Councillor Whipper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's no surprise that you wouldn't change, and I mean that with respect, wouldn't change your opinion, but there are a couple of surprises around the table. I mean, to think that the state government speaks and we quake. Yeah, well, that's exactly what the state government want us to do, isn't it? You know, we promise so much, you know, in our election campaigns, our belief in environment, our belief in character of our Shire, those things that are meaningful to people. We make those hand on heart promises every election. And we're tested in little ways like this, and what happens? You know, we go to water. I mean, my God, either you believe it or you don't. You know, it seems that we don't want to upset developers. Well, I didn't give a damn whether I upset a developer or the state government, to tell you the truth. Couldn't care less. Who's upset by the principles that I hold dear and a lot of people in this community hold dear? How many surveys and studies have we done, councillors, to see what is important to people in this Shire? Environment comes up there with you know, sort of glowing lights all the time. Our trees, our characteristics, our small villages, you know, all those things matter. You know, yet, you know, here we get an opportunity to make a statement and to sort of support those values and say they matter to us as well, not only at election time, but they matter to us all the time. And what do? We throw it away. Why? Because we might upset the state government. My God, I really fear for the future of this Shire. I really fear for the future of this Shire. I'm seeing all those telltale signs that I saw in Campbelltown area, Liverpool, you know, when it was just swamped, you know, for similar arguments to this. People retreat to get away from that, you know, those monstrosities. They come to places like this where they've got fresh air, night skies, you know, and all those things that we value. And we invite all of that machine in just to chew us up. I really, really am concerned. We had an opportunity, we were promised by state government to look at character statements for the Shire. Let's enshrine those in planning so we won't have a generic template, so we won't end up like everywhere else. And what do? We run those processes in parallel so that we don't know, really. You know, we've got no feedback from the community. We say, these are the housing strategies. You change your perception and your belief systems to fit our housing strategy. Cart before the horse. I mean, anyway, there's some of us in this community, not only me, there's a lot of people out there that I think will fight vehemently against that. But when we start to send out signs that, you know, we'll just approve anything for the sake of it because we might offend somebody, not a good look, councillors. So I'm not going to back down. I'm still voting in support of the rescission motion. And hopefully the community will wake up to who really shares those values seriously over time.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. So I put they all in favour of the rescission motion. Please raise your hand. Councillors Scandrett, Whipper and Halstead. Those against, Councillors Turland, Andrews, Markwart, McLaughlin and Gare. I declare the rescission motion lost and the names duly recorded. Now, part of the standing notice suspension of was that we look at the land acquisition, 11, was it number?
11.12.
Oh, 15.1, I'm on the wrong page.
Page 187, councillors.
Well, you still haven't done the...
Thank you very much, Councillor McLaughlin. You're right on the ball. Councillor McLaughlin, would you like to introduce this?
Yep. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, there is a slight... I'd like to make a slight adjustment.
No, hang on. Before you do, you've got to just read out what you're going to move and then look for a seconder.
Yeah, there's just a slight error in the petition containing over 50 signatures. Actually, it was more like 150 signatures, so I think the one got left off, Mr Mayor. That was what I was going to mention. But I'm happy to move the recommendation as is.
Seconded, Councillor Scandra.
With regard to, we've got some residents, long-suffering residents who've sat through a lot of council meeting today, Mr Mayor, to see this petition go up. And along with that, I'd like to present to you to go to our library, our resource library, a unique book that's been produced by two of our local historians, the Townsends, who have produced this. They've produced quite a few books that are a resource for council and our community, and I thank them very much for their support today. This brief history of Alf Stephen and Son goes to what we're trying to do, Mr Mayor, with regard to a heritage conservation area in Bowral that council has supported, and I hope council will continue to support. So with saying that, Mr Mayor, I'm going to present this book to you, which will go to our library.
Thank you very much.
It's a beautifully produced book, councillors, and it's a resource that I think this community can be very proud of. We've got people in our community that really feel for this area, have got a great feeling for heritage. They appreciate, you know, what went before us and the people that designed and did wonderful things in our community. This man built our courthouse, along with a lot of other things in our community. Now, it's just a petition, but these people today would like to preserve what we've got. We know we see changes in our community going forward, but this petition is to support this heritage conservation area and the houses that are identified. So I commend it to you, councillors, and I hope you can support this petition. But if I can get that number changed from 50, I think the one was left off, it should have been 150. So
okay, that's been clarified. So
and thank you to the community that's worked so hard to support this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Scandra.
With great respect, councillor, it's more than, it's not the petition, it is a significant bit of advice from our community. And I know we see a lot of these petitions come in, but it is a traditional way of showing, Mr Mayor, the feeling amongst the community. And I don't think people sign something just willy-nilly. I think they do think about it, and particularly in this case where it's a rather significant precinct in this area there. So I appreciate this petition coming in. I'm very concerned about the loss of character, loss of neighbourhood. We're going to go forward with these character statements, and we've been spending tonight matter after matter talking about neighbourhoods. How definitive is that?
Thank you, Councillor Scandra. Councillor Turland.
There's about 15,000 people live in the Bowral Shire, or township, municipality, it used to be known. And we're talking about a petition of 150 or 100. That's all it's about. We seem to be digressing now to a book, to other things. It's about a petition. That's it, 150 people. And we're digressed into all these other issues. As I said, there's about 15,000 people live in town, in Bowral. Yeah. It's a big difference, 115. It's what, a 0.011%. A petition.
Thank you. And Councillor Whipper.
So, yeah, thanks. I support this as well, and as you probably realise, I value heritage, and I'm assured that probably some of those forebears, they planted trees as well that they actually would have acknowledged and thought were sacred and protected, and we see that's not the case. So I just wanted to reinforce the fact that I'm consistently aware of the importance of our heritage and our environment, and I think we need to be consistent. And we don't always measure on the numbers, do we? I mean, we know petitions speak of much greater things than just a few signatures on the paper. They reflect, I think, some of the inner feelings of a community and a society. And I think it's just a little bit unfortunate that some of these arguments couldn't have been incorporated previously to acknowledge the heritage of those landscapes as well, and their contribution to our state of well-being.
Thank you, and thank you very much for that book, Councillor McLaughlin. I'll give it to the council staff. Okay, then those who have been part of this, I had a look at it. It has some lovely photos of some lovely houses. So acknowledge the hard work that went into that. But as Councillor Turlin said, we are receiving a petition, and that's what we are noting tonight, that the petition be received and noted. I put that all in favour. Those against, carried unanimously. We now... Suspension of standing orders, we're not going to go back to Okay, so we've done the suspension of standing orders. Somebody move, we go back to...
No, just before we go into suspension of standing orders, I brought up an issue in relation to a motion that Ken Housestead or Councillor Ken Housestead and I put forward legally
it is
in suspension
not, it was part...
This was met
Councillor Turlin, can you resume your seat, please, just for a minute? I am asking Councillor Turlin to resume his seat.
I will bring up a point on the code of meeting practice in a minute.
Councillor Turlin,
you will not shut me down.
Councillor Turlin, I'm not trying to shut anybody up.
Well, somebody has, because it wasn't in the business paper.
Councillor Turlin, we moved suspension of standing orders to deal with 4 specific items which we have dealt with. That was put, moved and seconded, and we have now done with those. That is not anything to do with what you are raising now. It is not part of the meeting. If you wish to raise an item, then I would suggest that you resubmit the notice of motion or whatever in discussion with the General Manager to make sure what you are submitting is correct and can go in the business paper. But I am ruling.
This motion was put in on the 17th.
I am sorry,
on Monday the 17th. It met the timeline.
Councillor,
we met the timeline.
Does not matter, Councillor.
It does matter a lot because the process has been broken. I can move a motion as 10.3. The motion point A says a motion can be moved 10.3. Can be moved without notice despite clause 11.12 and so on. I can move a motion without notice.
No,
because if you don't take it as per the notice, it was noticed and done properly.
Councillor Turlin, we have been having a reasonably good meeting. I will get it explained. You cannot do that. Can I?
I can do it. I have the motion in time period. We were told yesterday at 11 o'clock it was not.
Councillor Turlin, please resume your seat. Please resume your seat. Can council staff please clarify that position?
Admittedly, Councillor, you didn't get the notification until yesterday.
True.
However, I think it was a notice of motion, would not have been put on the business paper for the reasons that were given to you and Councillor Housestead. And that position remains.
You did not do it in the time period before the business paper was produced on Friday. You had 5 days. You did it yesterday.
Councillor Turland, you are out of order. You,
I have a motion that complies. And
no, council. That is your opinion. That is your opinion. Can you please resume your seat? Madam
Going to close council.
May I clarify 10.3 as quoted by Councillor Turland? Despite 10.1, business may be considered at a meeting of the council even though due notice of the business has not been given to the councillors if A. A motion is passed to have the business considered at the meeting and B. The business to be considered is ruled by the chairperson to be of great urgency on the grounds that it requires a decision by the council before the next scheduled ordinary meeting of council. The chair can't rule on this matter because the chair does not have any idea what you are talking about. I, as general manager, have to make a decision about what goes on the business paper. I carefully considered your notice of motion, and it would not have been put on the business paper even if it had been brought to my attention before the business paper went out.
Okay. On that basis, and Councillor Halstead, and then I'm shutting the debate because it is, but I'll allow Councillor Halstead to speak.
You will know, Mr Mayor, if not, you should have been consulted by the GM, that notice of ours was put in on the appropriate time, which was Monday of last week. Now, we get an answer back yesterday, whatever day it was, after the agenda's prepared, suggesting there's some reason why it shouldn't be there. I don't accept it, and I've had legal advice on it, and the advice I got, let me tell you, confirms what I think. So, I'm very annoyed about this, and I'll be taking an action elsewhere in two places. I'll let you, giving a fair warning now. It's not going to stop here because all this is doing is trying to shut us two down again.
No,
that's what it is, Mr Mayor.
Well, I don't know. I haven't read
I think you should have a look at it.
I have not read it. Councillor Turland sent it to me yesterday. I have not read it.
Yeah.
I saw the advice from staff, and as such, I will follow the staff direction and not rule this as a matter of urgency, that it cannot wait until next meeting.
I understand that, what you're saying. I don't accept it, but I hear it. I'm listening. Let's see what happens.
That's the ruling.
Let's see what happens. That's your ruling.
Yes.
Right, and I have no confidence in that ruling. And I'm letting you know that now, and I'm probably going to be moving something at the next meeting about your situation and that ruling you've made, because I am not going to be hoodwinked, GM's heard that one before, by any of you in terms of process.
All you want to do is shut people down, Mr Mayor.
No. Yes, you do.
No,
that's your game.
do not.
Now, motion
I rule it out of order and not...
You and I will debate it.
I rule it out of order. It is not a matter of urgency.
So you've now got to address that, Mr Mayor.
You can't do that.
10.5 says a motion of dissent can.
Yep.
There cannot be...
I would like to advise the councillors sitting around the table, if I may. We've just read 10.3. I think you all understand it. 10.5.
10.4.
10.5.
Read 10.4.
10.5. A motion of dissent cannot be moved against a ruling by the chairperson under clause 10.3b. That is the code of meeting practice,
Read
councillors.
10.4, please.
Yes, it says a motion can be moved without notice. Despite clause blah, 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 only the mover of a motion referred to in clause 10.3a can speak to the motion before it is put. But again, it goes back to 10.3b.
It has to be ruled as a matter of urgency. It is not a matter of urgency. It will not, cannot...
Mr Mayor, we met the timeline.
We met the timeline. Councillor Turland, I have made my ruling.
This is a breach of your own protocol and the code of meeting practice.
I have made my ruling.
It relates. Do you want me to read it about?
No, Councillor
Why not?
Turlett.
Why not?
Then if you do, because I have made the ruling. I have made the ruling. If you are going to do, then I will close the meeting. Do you want to close the meeting? No, I don't, but you are going to make me, Councillor Turlett, you are going to make me close the meeting.
I understand it's supported.
Councillor Scandrett.
No, you've done the same thing to me. I've had motions refused.
I declare the meeting adjourned for 15 minutes.
I have had motions
I declare
refused
the
on the
meeting
same...
adjourned.
Well, you're a coward, Mr Mayor. No, you're not dealing with it properly.
We're not prepared to break the law.
No, I won't.
No, that's not.
Well, read that. Read that, Graham. You don't know what's going on.